Chapter 985. Today is the third watch. Working hard on the fourth watch. The reason for doing this was simple. Jun Moxie wanted to create a false impression. That was to let everyone think that the Jean family had offended an extremely powerful and vicious opponent. And the methods of this opponent were also beyond everyone's imagination. Not only was he cruel and vicious, he could even make one wish for death. And the ultimate goal of doing this was naturally to not let anyone suspect that everything that happened here was related to that free and natural physique Mo Junyi. Although it was cruel, but Jun Moxie did not have the slightest bit of pity in his heart. To the Jean family, Jun Dashao felt that doing this was already very kind. Just as Dashao was advancing towards the Nine Nethers refining soul, even Jun Moxie himself did not expect that there was a secret chamber hidden in the place he was passing by, where the 6 highest echelons of the Jean family were having a discussion. And Jean Lunhui, this old fellow who had reincarnated for God knows how many times, was indeed quite skilled. He had actually used his unique mental senses to detect Jun Moxie's presence. Although he had only detected a tiny bit of it, but it was enough to explain the problem. Jun Moxie was still flying at full speed when a strange buzzing sound came from above his head. It was like the sound of a strange bell ringing. In just an instant, this strange sound had already spread throughout the entire underground world. In an instant, everyone in the underground world was on the verge of pulling out their swords and jumping into a state of panic. For so many years, no outsider had ever been able to barge into this underground world. And now, an enemy had really barged in. This was the biggest secret of the Jean family. How could the people of the Jean family not panic? If they really let the intruder escape, then the biggest secret of the Jean family would probably be spread throughout the entire Misty Mansion in a single night. In that case, all the aristocratic families would definitely be alerted, because there was no way to conceal such a secret. Whatever the Jean family wanted to do in the future, it would be much more difficult. In fact, they might even become the public enemy of the other 7 aristocratic families because of this matter. And it was not impossible for them to lose everything in the end. One wrong move and the whole game was lost. So to the Jean family, this was an earth-shattering matter. Everyone had raised this matter to a certain level. The intruder must be caught and executed. Only then would they be able to loosen the tension in everyone's hearts. In front of Jun Moxie, a group of human silhouettes flickered. 5 or 6 people in black robes appeared at high speed. They swept through the area and instantly gathered together. Did anyone discover anything? That thief is extremely cunning and didn't leave a single trace behind. The only thing we can be sure of is that the thief is still in the underground world and hasn't left yet. This can be considered a blessing in disguise. It's good that they didn't leave. Everyone, continue searching. He had to find it. We can't let him leave. 5 silhouettes split into 5 different directions with a schwat sound and flew out at high speed. The Jean family's foundation is indeed strong. These 5 people actually all have the cultivation of a saint. Their strength is only slightly weaker than a saint emperor at most. From this, it can be seen that the Jean family's plans are not small. Jun Moxie looked at the path that the 5 of them had taken as he thought to himself. These 5 experts actually lived underground for so long as white people, then wouldn't the Jean family's plan be even more shocking? Right at this moment, another series of urgent bell chimes rang out. All the Jean family members who were searching the underground world did not hesitate at all. Like a receding tide, they retreated back to their respective secret rooms. Banging sounds rang out one after another as the stone doors of each secret room were tightly shut at an abnormal speed. Only the empty passageway outside was left open. What's going on? Jun Moxie was puzzled. Why did they completely relax after being so nervous for a while? Why did they completely stop searching? What kind of method was this? Did they really have to give up? Just as he was filled with doubts, a faint buzzing sound suddenly rang out. From all the entrances of the passageways, countless strange flying insects that looked like bees swarmed in. They flapped their wings and flew in the passageways. From the looks of it, there were at least a few thousand of them. Could it be that they want to use these insects to track me down? What can these little bugs do? June Moxie was still in the yin-yang escape state. Under the yin-yang escape state, it was equivalent to being invisible in the void, invulnerable. Dashao's heart was at ease, and he was not the least bit afraid. At most, he was just a little suspicious. It seemed like these little insects were a more effective method of searching for the Zhan family. Unfortunately, they met this young master. You are destined to be disappointed. June Moxie laughed coldly in his heart. He was about to continue moving forward according to his original plan to search for the two Zhan family brothers. However, in that split second, he suddenly saw the little bugs that had swarmed in from the various entrances of the passageways were actually flying in his direction. And every single one of them had a clear target. Could it be that these little insects can really detect my presence? June Moxie frowned as he looked at the little insects flying closer and closer. The yin-yang escape had never failed until now. Could it be that it was going to be broken by these little insects today? Dashao's guess was not wrong. These little insects did not have any attack power. They were a type of mysterious insect that Zhan Luanhui had accidentally obtained during one of his near-death experiences. These insects lived in places where there were many dead people, because they needed the thick aura of the dead to survive and reproduce. Also, although these insects did not have much attack power, they had the strange ability to devour the souls of the dead. It was because of this special ability that they were especially sensitive to the souls of the living. After Zhan Luanhui obtained this thing, he felt that although this thing did not have any actual power, it was a great help in defense and tracking. So he bred it and named it the Thousand Ghost Devourer insect. Before today, using this thing to track or discover hidden enemies was very effective. It had never failed. Today, seeing that the entire Zhan family had been mobilized and still could not find the whereabouts of that intruder, he released this Thousand Ghost Devourer insect. And the effect was very obvious. The moment this Thousand Ghost Devourer insect came out, it discovered June Moxie's whereabouts. Although June Moxie was in a state of concealment and no one could see him, these bugs did not need to be seen. Besides, even if he was in a state of concealment, the ripples of his soul still existed. Of course, this was because June Moxie's skills were still shallow. He had yet to truly unleash the true meaning of the yin-yang escape. Right now, he was still in a half-real, half-illusory state. It was reasonable that he was discovered by these little creatures that were extremely sensitive to the soul. But June Moxie, who did not have a thorough understanding of the yin-yang escape, was shocked. He did not expect that there would be such a strange creature in this world. Could it be that such an inconspicuous little insect had actually broken the yin-yang escape that he had never failed before? When this insect appeared, Dashao had already felt an extremely sinister aura. Moreover, the air was suddenly filled with a disgusting stench of corpses. This made June Moxie have a certain understanding of the origin of this thing. He could not help but feel a strong sense of disgust, because when he was observing the Zhan family's luck, that feeling of disgust was very similar to the feeling he was feeling right now. Right at this time, a middle-aged man with a face full of smiles suddenly appeared about 4 to 5 zhang away from June Moxie. The moment this middle-aged man appeared, he looked like a rich man, smiling wholeheartedly at June Moxie. Your skills are impressive, and you're already here. Why don't you show yourself and let our Zhan family play the role of a host? Let's have a good chat and bury the hatchet. Wouldn't it be good to become friends? June Moxie did not reply. Although the yin-yang escape was unexpectedly broken, he did not feel the slightest bit of fear. If he wanted to escape, he only needed to use the earth escape technique to disappear without a trace. Since he still had a lot of trump cards in his hands, why was he in a hurry to leave? Giving up halfway was never Dashao's style. And it seemed like only those insects had discovered him. These people could only estimate his approximate location based on the insects' reactions. How useful could that be? Laughing hoarsely, June Moxie replied in a strange voice, "Young Zhan family, do you really think that you can catch an old man like me with these insects? Then, you are a little too naive." Before he finished speaking, a cold voice behind him said, "We are not interested in catching you. Because since you have come here, you are destined to not be able to leave alive." June Moxie turned around and saw a group of insects. About 7 to 8 feet behind him, there was a man dressed in black standing like a javelin. The way he stood, the only thing June Moxie could think of was an unsheathed sharp sword. It was as if this person was an unparalleled sharp sword. From the person behind him, there was an awe-inspiring coldness and murderous aura that continued to surge out. June Moxie secretly released his powerful divine soul to probe. To his surprise, he realized that the two people in front of him were both super experts. And their strength was far beyond the level of the Holy Emperor. With his current strength, if he were to fight them head-on, he would definitely not be a match for any one of them. But now, there were two of them attacking from the front and the back. The situation seemed to be a little bad. June Moxie said in a hoarse voice. What a funny thing to say. This old man has always regarded death as a return home. Ever since I came to this world, I have never thought of going back alive. Nonsense. You are about to die and you are still spouting such nonsense. Then I will definitely give you a death that is worse than death. After the man in black finished speaking, he suddenly moved. As he made his move, the 10,000 ghost devourer worms in front of him suddenly parted, and then there were hundreds of sharp sword cheese flying towards him. Chapter 986. The entire passageway was engulfed in flames, and a terrifying heat wave filled the entire underground world of the Jean family. The two people in front and behind were instantly engulfed in flames. How despicable! To actually set a fire! An abnormally cold and powerful force instantly gushed out. With a schwa sound, it went from one end of the passageway to the other. Wherever the cold air went, the raging fire was extinguished. Even the stone walls on both sides were immediately covered with a layer of white frost. The blazing flames disappeared in an instant, and the two enemies in front and in front of him reappeared. Both of them were unscathed, but their expressions were extremely ugly. There was no other reason. Although they were completely unharmed by this fire, all the 1,000 ghost devourer insects in the passageway had been incinerated. Not a single one was left. There was a strange burning smell everywhere in the engraved passageway, accompanied by a burning fragrance. So the purpose of this mysterious person setting the fire was not to deal with the two of them, nor was it to distract them. It was to completely eradicate these 1,000 ghost devourer insects, so that he could use his concealment technique without any more scruples. Faced with such a huge change, even Jean Hui, who had been observing the battle from the shadows, was dumbfounded. His hands trembled, and his eyes were filled with disbelief. The words "how is this possible" almost came out of his mouth. Others might not know, but how could Jean Hui not know? If these 1,000 ghost devourer insects could really be burned to death so easily, then they wouldn't be worth Jean Hui's attention to not have any defensive measures at all. Jean Hui had experimented many times before. These 1,000 ghost devourer insects were not afraid of fire at all. Even if they were burned for 2 hours in the highest temperature of the blazing flames, these insects would still be able to fly out of the flames unscathed. But this unexpected scene before him was something that the experienced Jean Hui could not accept. The 3,000 over 1,000 ghost devourer insects that he had painstakingly cultivated had all been turned into ashes by this strange wave of flames. If there was really something strange about those flames, then how could they be extinguished by that icy palm? Everything was strange and inconceivable. In fact, no one would have thought of it. Because in this tunnel, there was nothing to illuminate it. It was completely dark. No one noticed that in fact, in the instant before the raging fire was ignited, there was another black flame that had completely fused with the darkness of the tunnel. In fact, it was only after the black flames began to burn that the large fire that engulfed the entire passageway began to burn. Although the process between the two could be said to be extremely similar, there was still a difference. When the fire was ignited, those insects had already been completely turned into ashes by the black flames. By the time the fire was fully ignited, the black flames had already retreated and quietly disappeared. As far as the conclusion was concerned, the abnormally powerful flames were just a smokescreen. Otherwise, even if he had the power of the ice-cold palm, what could it do? At this moment, the flames were extinguished, and darkness returned to the passageway. Zhang Yishao and Zhang Tu snorted angrily. The two of them moved at the same time, attacking the place where the mysterious person's voice had come from. But to their shock, they realized that all their Xian Qi had hit nothing but air. There was no place to exert force at all. Even if there was a place to exert force, it was just that their Xian Qi had lost control and hit the stone walls outside. The enemy had already disappeared. The two of them were top experts. Since the enemy had already left, there was no need for them to continue their futile efforts. They stopped at the same time and looked at each other, seeing the deep shock in each other's eyes. Who was this person? To actually be able to maintain his position under the full force attacks of two Saint Venerables, and even calmly exterminate those 3,000 ghost devourer insects before disappearing without a trace. The two Saint Venerables actually did not even see a corner of the enemy's clothes in the entire process. And the enemy had achieved an unimaginably glorious victory right in front of the two of them. Even if they told the truth, no one would be willing to believe such a thing. It was simply too shocking. What was even more unexpected was that Jun Dashao did not actually stop while he was ahead and truly left. The young master just leaned his body against the stone wall, and in an instant he disappeared into it. He had originally planned to use his advantage of being invisible, the sharpness of the blood of yellow flame, and the uniqueness of the art of unlocking heaven's fortune to launch a sneak attack and kill these two people, or even just one of them. But he immediately realized that although he had already reached the third level of the Holy Emperor realm and was already above Chao Guofeng in terms of strength, there was still a huge gap between him and these two people before him. In addition, these two people were on full alert. If he attacked rashly, he would definitely not achieve the desired effect. Instead, he would expose his own trump cards. So Jun Moxie forcefully suppressed the tempting thought of launching a sneak attack. While the two of them were still looking around suspiciously, Jun Moxie activated the power of earth again and penetrated through the stone wall towards the other side. Dashao activated the power of earth and became one with the stone wall. In an instant, he realized that the stone wall he had penetrated through this time was much thicker than the stone walls he had just passed through. The thickest stone walls before were only about 10 feet thick at most. But this stone wall was at least 10 feet thick. He had clearly swum a distance of more than 10 feet, but he still had not reached the other side. One had to know that the underground world created by the Zhan family could be said to be extremely huge. Almost all of the stone layers had been broken through. No matter what, there was no reason to leave a stone wall over 10 feet thick and not make use of it. Behind this stone wall, there must be some huge secret. Jun Moxie steeled his heart and continued to penetrate through. Since he had the yin-yang escape and the 5 elements mystique, where couldn't he go in this world? After passing through another 7 to 8 feet thick, his eyes suddenly lit up. Then, an indescribable stench hit him in the face. At that moment, Jun Moxie actually had a strong urge to vomit. Dashao took a closer look and couldn't help but be enraged. What came into view was an unusually vast space. To be more precise, this place was a deep pit. In this deep pit, there were innumerable corpses densely packed together. There were layers upon layers of corpses, and with just a cursory glance, one could tell that there were at least tens of thousands of corpses in here. A few layers below, many of the corpses had already rotted, revealing their white bones. But the few layers at the top still looked like they were alive. Obviously, they had just died and were thrown in. Jun Moxie's current position was on the stone wall above this pit of 10,000 corpses. Puff, puff, puff. Several lines of blood splattered. It was a dozen more corpses that were thrown down. Then an extremely respectful voice said, "Ancestor, these are the 300 corpses for today. They have all been handed over. Do you have any other instructions? If there is anything lacking, this junior will immediately make arrangements." Well done this time. A gloomy voice said with satisfaction, "There is only one thing. Don't forget. Tomorrow we need at least 500 corpses. We must have fresh corpses. There must be no mistakes. Don't mess up the big plan." Jun Moxie looked towards the direction of the voice. On the high stone platform, there was an old man who was all skin and bones. He was sitting on the stone platform, holding a strangely shaped long object in his hand. In front of the old man, there was a completely black cauldron. Within the cauldron, there was a faint black fog floating. Below the cauldron, there were 9 other extremely thin black tubes that extended all the way to the bottom of the 10,000 corpses cave. His ancestor. The voice seemed to be a little afraid. It was as if he wanted to say something but did not dare to. After thinking for a while, he stammered, "Most of the people near the main house have been killed. If such a large number of killings continue, I'm afraid there will be people who will intervene. In fact, there are already people from the Miao family, Zhang family, and a few other big families who are investigating the whereabouts of the missing people. If this continues, I'm afraid." "What are you afraid of?" The gloomy voice said, "As long as our hands and feet are clean, not to mention a few hundred, even a few thousand is nothing. These people were nothing more than ant-like commoners. Who would really care about them? If the number of heads here is really not enough, we can go to Heart Fantasy City to start. The more the better. Yes, this lowly one is just here to ask for instructions. Everything is based on your progress. It's just that if we want to go to Heart Fantasy City to search for more people, the journey will be a little long. Also, the number of people that Ancestor needs this time is too large. I'm afraid we will need to send more people. If it's just the few of us, I'm afraid it's not enough. If we ruin Ancestor's plans, your considerations are reasonable. Go and find Zhan Wuyun. Let him make the specific arrangements. Especially tell him that I'm already at a crucial moment here. You must not stop. Once the nourishment of the living beings is stopped, there will be the danger of all our previous efforts going to waste. Then this lowly one will take his leave." A fierce-looking man bowed respectfully and slowly retreated. Jun Moxie slowly floated up from the stone wall. Staring at the skinny old man on the stone platform, the killing intent in his heart surging. Everything in front of him was obviously some kind of conspiracy that the Zhan family was carrying out. And that conspiracy actually required countless corpses of living beings as sacrifices in order to extract the power of the dead souls from them to achieve some kind of goal. This old man was treating human lives as grass. This kind of behavior could no longer be described as simply cruel and vicious. It was completely inhumane. Using the words of his previous life, this was directly anti-human and anti-society. The murderous Jun Moxie had just raised his palm and was about to make his move when a figure suddenly flashed by the door. Someone walked in and asked calmly, "How is it? How's your progress today?" Chapter 987. This was because the person who came later was actually a young man in his 30s. He was dressed in green and his face was pale. Even his eyes seemed to be completely pale. Jun Moxie had originally thought that the person who could speak to this skeleton-like old demon in such an arrogant tone would at least be another old demon. But he had never expected that the person who had come would be so young. This was too unexpected. The old man had just stood up, but before he could reply, the young man suddenly frowned and looked suspiciously in the direction of the stone wall where Jun Moxie was. Could he have discovered me? Jun Moxie's heart skipped a beat. In an instant an idea struck him. The yin-yang escape changed again, and his body melted into the most abundant corpse chi in this place. The young man looked around suspiciously, but did not find anything strange. Finally, he continued. The person who barged in today has unfathomable xian qi, and he has other mysterious methods. He appears and disappears unpredictably. Until now, we cannot be sure if he is still here or if he has already left. Regardless of whether he has left or not, it will be a disaster for us. If he is still here, with his strange concealment methods, the Zhan family will not be able to keep any secrets from him. He paused for a while before continuing. What's more frightening is that this person has already left. No matter who he is, once he gets out, the Zhan family's secrets that he knows will be enough to put the Zhan family in danger. So, you must gather the maximum amount of corpse chi in the shortest time possible and forcefully block the Miao family's meridians. Let the Miao family's remaining luck flow into the Zhan family's meridians within 3 days. Only then can the Zhan family escape this calamity. No matter how the other aristocratic families react, they will need at least 3 days to completely suppress us. And this is exactly the time we need. The skinny old man's body trembled. I understand the severity of the situation, but if we really do this, I'm afraid it will be too hasty and we will easily make mistakes. Old ancestor, you are also an expert in this field. You should know that this kind of thing is most taboo to be rash. What we're executing is a technique that defies the heavens. If any mishap were to occur, it would be extremely difficult to remedy. The young man said calmly, I naturally understand this kind of situation. However, the current situation doesn't allow us to wait any longer. We can only try our best to move forward. It was inevitable that the secret of this place would be revealed. If this matter was not completed by then, the entire Jean family would be doomed. There would be no turning back. The Jean family may be strong, but they have no chance of winning against the combined forces of the Misty Mansion and the other 7 great families. A man's strength is limited, and the world is unpredictable. We really can't do anything about this accident. The young man raised his head with a sinister expression and cursed fiercely, this damn intruder. Who could it be? No matter who he is, if the Jean family can't escape this calamity, I will make sure this person's entire family is buried with him. Since things have come to this, I will immediately do my best to complete this task. The shriveled old man pondered for a long time before replying in an almost stern tone. His expression was actually quite heroic, as if he would have to sacrifice himself to complete this task. Don't worry, after this matter is completed, I have my ways to recover the lifespan that you've lost. It will take at most a year to completely recover and even improve. The young man was Jean Luanhui. Right now, his tone was exceptionally stern. Many thanks, old ancestor. The shriveled old man was naturally Jean Tianji. Hearing this, he couldn't help but feel slightly relieved. What he was doing was purely going against the heavens. Although it was the art of feng shui, it still required one's own blood as a guide. If not for this, how could he be so skinny that even a skeleton would be shocked? After Jean Luanhui finished speaking, he did not stay any longer and immediately left this huge stone chamber. Seeing that Jean Luanhui had left, Jean Tianji stood there silently, not moving for a long time. He seemed to be deliberating for a long time before letting out a long sigh. Finally, he sat down cross-legged again, took a deep breath, and raised both his palms. Suddenly, the entire stone chamber exploded with light. As the light exploded, the corpses in the pit in front of Jean Tianji suddenly emitted a whooshing sound. Outside the door, Jean Luanhui, who was also standing silently, smiled in satisfaction when he heard this sound. Then, he took a step forward and really left. Jun Moxie raised his head and saw that on the ceiling of this stone chamber, there was an extremely detailed and complete picture. The content was the 9 peaks of the Misty Mansion. On that picture, the connections between the peaks were like the meridians of a human body, and there was a faint flow of light. The corpse aura in the pit made whooshing sounds and slowly condensed in midair, finally forming a ball of extremely evil black and purple chi. With a whoosh, it landed in the cauldron in front of Jean Tianji, and the 9 pipes under the cauldron suddenly moved. Then, a thin black and purple light rose from the cauldron and crashed into the mountain range of the Miao family in the picture on the ceiling. In an instant, the color representing the Miao family dimmed a little. A breath later, as Jean Tianji roared with all his might, "Go!" A gray gas floated down from above, and with a whoosh, it flew towards the upper left corner of this stone chamber. Then, the stone wall at that position actually became illusory and hazy. As for that gray gas from before, it had already flown out from that position and disappeared, and the direction in which the gray gas disappeared was coincidentally the direction of the Miao family's earth meridians. Jun Moxie could even confirm that the gas had landed at the crucial point where the Miao family's earth meridians were connected to the main peak. After doing all this, Jean Tianji's face instantly turned red. He coughed with all his might, taking in deep breaths of the air in the stone chamber, as if he did not mind this thick stench of corpses and turbid air at all. After a long time, Jean Tianji's face turned abnormally pale again. The skin on his face also seemed to loosen a little. His eyes also lost all their luster. He meditated quietly, and an exceptionally pure and deep Xian qi flowed rapidly in his meridians. It was as if he wanted to quickly recover his strength in this short period of time, and that cauldron in front of him did not stop moving. The 9 strange tubes under the cauldron were still vibrating continuously, causing the corpses and bones below to tremble slightly. Not long after, another thick wave of corpse aura gradually condensed. Following that, another wave of red fog once again surged in from the upper right corner of the stone chamber. Just like before, it circled around and disappeared. Jun Moxie, who had some attainments in the art of feng shui, finally understood the mystery behind this. The Zhan family had actually used the lives of countless people to kill them here, producing the thickest grievance in the world, accumulating it to form a corpse miasma. Then, using a formation that was completely similar to the 9 peaks of the Misty Mansion, they forcefully blocked the flow of the Miao family's fortune. At the same time, they had completely blocked the Miao family's channel, forcefully grafting their fortune onto the Zhan family's side. Just looking at the corpses in this pit, there must have been at least tens of thousands of people who had died here. And every day, there were only 300 corpses. Even if there were more, there would be no more than 500, and the numbers would continue to increase. It looked like the numbers would have been even lesser at the start. Then, how long had the Zhan family been carrying out this plot? But no matter what, Jun Mo Xie absolutely abhorred this kind of cruel behavior. I was once a grassroots. Although we don't have any great abilities, and we can never see the actions of the upper echelons, we will never be willing to accept that our fates are just sacrifices for the so-called big shots to fight for power. Jun Moxie's hand had already connected to the Hongjun Pagoda's space, and he gripped the hilt of the blood of yellow flame tightly. In his heart, the killing intent slowly gathered, gradually climbing to the peak. Zhan Tianji rested for a while and recovered some of his energy. Knowing that there was no time to lose, and that he could not afford to relax, he immediately began the next round of blood refinement. Looking at the ball of black and purple air forming again, a rare smile appeared on Zhan Tianji's skinny face. Even though it was so ugly, it was still a smile. He pointed his finger, and the ball of black and purple air landed in the cauldron. Then, after a moment of tumbling, a thin beam of black and purple light shot up. Right at this moment, Zhan Tianji was at his weakest, and at the same time, he was at his most relaxed. Because the rest of the process would be completed automatically by the formation, and he didn't need to do anything. But at this moment, even breathing was difficult for him. Although he was already a Saint Venerable expert, his current weakness was still obvious. Even a powerful person would have to pay a huge price for tampering with fate and stealing it from the heavens. And Jun Moxie chose to make his move at this moment. He only took a step in the void, but he had already traversed a distance of over 200 feet, instantly appearing in front of Zhan Tianji. This kind of speed had already exceeded the limits of a human's movement speed. Immediately after, a ball of explosive sword chi suddenly filled the air. It was as if the entire space between heaven and earth had collapsed at this moment. A bright light, accompanied by a burning pain, crashed into Zhan Tianji's eyes. Such a sudden change actually caused this Saint Venerable expert to fall into a sorry state in an instant. Zhan Tianji didn't have the slightest bit of defense. This was the core area of the Zhan family, and also the place with the tightest security. In the entire Misty Mansion, other than the spiritual herbal gardens, this was the place that was the least likely to have any accidents. Here, he completely did not have the awareness of being attacked by an enemy. Even though he had heard that something unexpected had happened here today, and that an unknown powerful enemy had barged into the underground world, Zhan Tianji was still certain that this was a secret place that no one would be able to barge in. Chapter 988. Zhan Tianji had always been confident in his own abilities. He had always thought that wherever he was, it was definitely the safest place. Ever since he was born, there had never been an enemy who could successfully scheme against him. Because he was Tianjizi, a legend among legends, Tianjizi. But now, at this moment, this absolute accident had really happened. And the price of this accident would be Zhang Tianji's own life. The sword light swept through the heavens and the earth, bringing with it a destructive aura as it descended. Zhang Tianji only had the time to think, what entered my eyes was the tip of a long sword. But in this world, how could there be such a bright sword? Before he had the time to think, that sword had already pierced deeply into Zhang Tianji's heart. Zhang Tianji screamed at the top of his lungs. Although his voice was hoarse, it was earth-shattering. Right now, although he was blind, he knew that he had already suffered a fatal injury. And because of his previous exhaustion, he did not have much Xian Qi left for him to use to save his life, but Zhang Tianji was ultimately a saint venerable. The sudden and inexplicable longsword pierced through his heart in an instant. The murderous aura attached to the sword exploded in an instant, completely destroying his heart and destroying his dantian. Moreover, in that instant, the tyrannical profound energy seemed as if it was crushing dry weeds and smashing rotten wood, and it completely crushed his internal organs. But to a saint venerable, this kind of injury was still not fatal, which meant that Zhang Tianji still had a chance to live. As long as he could fight for that last bit of time, he still had a chance to live. Zhang Tianji, who was in a desperate situation, fought with his life on the line. But his skinny hands suddenly flipped over, and two shining short swords appeared in his palms. And the moment the two swords appeared, they pierced forward like a poisonous dragon coming out of the water. The moment the short swords appeared, a cold light shot out from the blades and shot forward at high speed. This was Zhang Tianji's last attack as a saint venerable. Even someone of Chao Guifeng's level would die instantly if they were to collide with these two lights. And it would be a tragic ending where his soul would be destroyed. In reality, Zhang Tianji had never thought of killing his enemy. He did not have such a delusion. That idea was too extravagant and completely unrealistic. Since the other party could successfully launch a sneak attack on him, then the other party's strength was definitely not too weak. At the very least, the other party should be at the same level as him. In fact, it was even more likely that the other party was much stronger than him. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been completely unaware of it. Zhang Tianji's wish right now was very simple. It was so small that it could be said to be extremely small. Right now, he only hoped that the other party would dodge. Yes, just a flash would do. Even if he didn't pull out the sword from his body, as long as he let go of the sword hilt, he would be able to use the soul-dissolving technique in a short period of time and convert all of his cultivation and soul force into a wholly nascent soul. As long as he could successfully form his nascent soul, he wouldn't even need any time to escape from this stone room. After that, he just had to choose a body from the Zhan family. He only needed 100 years of cultivation to return to his current level. To a saint venerable, a body was nothing more than a bag of skin that contained one's soul. So be it. It wasn't a big deal at all. Or perhaps this wish was too small, and the other party really dodged. Although Zhang Tianji still couldn't see, with his saint venerable senses, he could still clearly feel that the other party's hand had let go of the sword hilt and dodged sideways. Zhang Tianji was overjoyed. He immediately activated his martial arts, and with a bang, his physical body shattered from his dantian. Although the sword was still stuck in his body, this sword was no longer a threat to him, because he had successfully formed his wholly nascent soul. Even if this sword slashed his original body into pieces, as long as the wholly nascent soul could escape, then he, Zhang Tianji, would still be Zhang Tianji. The reason why he had such confidence was because the wholly nascent soul's speed was unparalleled in this world. But Zhang Tianji immediately despaired. Perhaps the wholly nascent soul's speed was truly unparalleled, but it didn't mean that it was invincible. When Zhang Tianji successfully formed his wholly nascent soul, he was overjoyed and immediately flew away from his broken physical body. But he immediately realized that he didn't seem to be flying as fast as he had imagined. He took a closer look and realized that there was a shiny sword stuck in his tiny wholly nascent soul's body. And this shiny sword actually emitted a very human-like feeling of mockery. His senses were not wrong. It was this sword that was mocking him. Zhang Tianji's mind was in chaos. Wasn't the holy nascent soul formless and traceless? Wasn't it impossible for anyone to discover the holy nascent soul's existence? Why was there a physical sword stuck in his body now? Jean Tianji thought in a panic. Following that, he discovered something else that caused him to be filled with terror and despair. The sword that was stabbed into his holy infant suddenly emitted a terrifying suction force that he could not resist. Like a whale sucking in water, it rapidly swallowed all the exquisite cultivation and soul power that had just been formed in his holy nascent soul's body. In another instant, he realized that there was a black-robed youth standing quietly in the void not too far away. His hands were empty, and there was a cold smile on his lips as he looked at him quietly. "No. I don't want to die. I beg you, let me go. I am the legend of Shen Shu Tianjizi. I am willing to do anything for you. Willing to do anything for you? Let me go." Zhang Tianji begged hysterically. His tiny holy nascent soul waved his arms and legs as he begged for mercy. His face was filled with fear, and even tears. However, the black-clothed young man did not move at all. He continued to stand there indifferently. All he could see was that sword. Moreover, that demonic sword had never stopped absorbing energy from his body. No. Zhang Tianji let out a heart-wrenching cry. His tiny body that he had painstakingly gathered once again turned into nothingness. All his energy was still swallowed by that sword. All of it had been converted into the purest energy of the blood of yellow flame. Zhang Tianji. He had been fighting against heaven's secrets his entire life. Even at the final moments of his life, he was still trying to change heaven's secrets and defy the heavens. But heaven's secrets were unparalleled. How could a human be able to fight against it? Heaven's secrets were unpredictable. How could a human be able to change it? So in the end, Zhang Tianji had died under the hands of the heaven's secrets that he had changed. And heaven's secrets were still heaven's secrets. With a clang, the blood of yellow flame actually let out a sword cry of satisfaction. It had truly benefited greatly from this nourishment this time. How could the full power of a saint venerable be insignificant? Did you eat to your heart's content this time? Jun Moxie smiled, but there was a hint of grumbling in his voice. This time, you really took all the benefits. I didn't get anything at all. The blood of yellow flame let out a crisp cry. It was filled with joy as it slowly circled around him. Then, Jun Moxie pointed his finger. The blood of yellow flame flew out with a whoosh. With a loud explosion, the cauldron that was originally placed on the high platform exploded with a loud bang. The black and purple stench from within splattered everywhere. Then, the blood of yellow flame flew up again without any hesitation. It went to the ceiling of the stone room and slashed at the ceiling. Above the stone room, that painting that was exactly the same as the 9 peaks of the Misty Mansion was instantly riddled with holes. Then, it came crashing down with a loud rumble. At this time, the sound of clothes fluttering in the air rang out from outside. Jun Moxie's eyes turned. His right hand glowed with a faint yellow light as he pressed downwards. With a loud bang, the entire stone room was flipped over. The soil that was hidden deep underground surged out, burying all the corpses. It was better to let them rest in peace first. After doing all this, Jun Moxie immediately turned invisible again. After that, he directed the blood of yellow flame to stab the upper left corner of the stone room. A strange and mysterious gas was emitted, continuously dissipating, surging out, and dissipating again. He slashed at the upper right corner again. This time, countless red mist was emitted, and in an instant, no one knew where they went. The Zhan family's grand scheme that had been going on for who knew how many generations, who knew how many years, who knew how many people had been sacrificed in order to perfect this scheme. But under these few unreasonable actions of young Master Jun, it was completely ruined. Even the luck of the Zhan family itself had been greatly damaged. The heavens were watching the actions of men. If the heavens were to commit evil, they could do it. But if they were to commit evil, they would not be able to live. If the Zhan family knew that the cause of this incident was because Zhan Qingfeng and Zhan Yushu had provoked Jun Moxie, they would definitely regret setting up that plot against the free and natural physique. Jun Mo saw that there was no hope of restoring the arrangements here. Even if he had to forcefully arrange everything, he would have to start all over again. Putting away the blood of yellow flame, Jun Mo activated the yin-yang escape art and once again hit himself in the stone wall. Messy footsteps rang out. The first to rush in was still Jean Luanhui. He had just returned to his room and was getting angrier and angrier as he listened to the reports coming in continuously. There's still no sign of the intruder. There's no sign on the left either. There's no sign on the right. The intruder seems to have left quietly. Hearing these reports, Jean Luanhui's expression grew darker and darker. Since when did the Jean family become so useless? Even when someone barged into the most secret place of the family and mobilized all their manpower, they still couldn't find any trace of the intruder. Did that person really leave just like that? Continuing to work on the third and fourth chapter. So tired. My stamina seems to have reached a limit. Although I'm still holding on stubbornly, but my eyes are starting to blur. Chapter 989. The third update. The fourth update will probably be around 1 in the morning. Brothers who can't wait can sleep early and watch tomorrow. Perhaps that person was really incredible. After all, even his 10,000 ghost devourer insects were completely destroyed in a single exchange. To Jean Luanhui, this was a great humiliation that was hard to wash away. He sat in his room with a dark face, quietly spreading out his spirit power to search the area. But he still didn't find anything. When Jean Tu, Jean Yishao, and Jean Xiaoxiao returned and also said that they didn't find anything, Jean Luanhui finally let out a long sigh and didn't speak anymore. Although he didn't speak anymore, this abnormal silence made everyone feel even more uneasy. Jean Tu and the other 2 Saint Venerables didn't even dare to breathe too loudly in front of him. Although Jean Luanhui was only a 4th level saint, and these 3 people were 10 levels higher than him, the 3 of them still didn't dare to be disrespectful. Because this person before them was the true ancestor of the Jean family. If it wasn't for him, there wouldn't be a single person with the surname Jean in this misty mansion. Besides, his current strength was the result of him purposely suppressing it. He wanted to build a solid foundation in preparation for charging to the legendary peak in the future. Otherwise, his current strength would have long surpassed them. How could the reincarnation of the Holy Infant only have this bit of foundation? Just as Jean Luanhui was feeling gloomy and Jean Yishao and the other 2 were feeling uneasy, they suddenly felt a tremor from afar. At the same time, a loud howl rang out. Jean Xiaoxiao was shocked and blurted out, "That's where Jean Tianji is." Before he could finish his sentence, the other 3 had already rushed out. Jean Xiaoxiao quickly used his movement techniques and followed. The 4 of them arrived at the 10,000 Corpses cave and were shocked by the scene before them. Even the deep foundation of a Saint Venerable was completely useless at this moment. The 10,000 Corpses cave was no longer what it used to be. It was completely destroyed. What Jean Luanhui was most concerned about was the change of fortune. He was the first to look up. With one look, Jean Luanhui almost spat out a mouthful of blood. There was nothing left on the stone wall above his head. In the upper left corner of the stone chamber, there was a huge hole. In the upper right corner, there was also a huge hole. The cauldron on the high platform had shattered into pieces. In front of the cauldron was Jean Tianji's mangled corpse. Jean Luanhui's body swayed as he stared blankly at everything before him. All his hopes turned to dust. Generations of ancestors had been making arrangements for thousands of years, a huge scheme that had been prepared for several lifetimes. Just when they were so close to success, it was completely destroyed by someone. Furthermore, it was so thoroughly destroyed. So merciless. Wasn't this the reason why the underground world had been constructed for thousands of years? Now, the subterranean world had been perfected, but here, the core, the most important place, had been destroyed in a day. Then, what was the point of thousands of years of hard work? For thousands of years, how many outstanding disciples of the Jean family had been born here, grown up here, and spent their entire lives here, dying here of old age, never seeing the sun in their entire lives? For thousands of years, they had buried their conscience, constantly killing innocent and defenseless citizens, enduring so much guilt from their conscience. Right now, they were about to succeed, but at this crucial moment when they were so close to success, all of this had turned into bubbles. Old ancestor? Seeing that Zhang Lunhui's expression was not right, Zhang Yishao called out worriedly. Zhang Lunhui's face suddenly turned red. His body shook violently and he spat out a mouthful of blood. There was no rage or anger in his expression. It was actually frozen in a strange tranquility. After spitting out that mouthful of blood, Zhang Lunhui returned to normal. He walked slowly to Zhang Tianji's corpse and clasped his hands together. Then he made a series of strange hand gestures. Balls of milky white light formed in his hands and landed on Zhang Tianji's corpse, but after a long time, there was no reaction at all. Zhang Lunhui finally stopped. He spoke in a voice so calm that it sent chills down one's spine. What vicious, and ruthless methods. Not only did he destroy the physical body, he also destroyed Tianji's spiritual seed. Even the holy infant did not manage to escape. It was a complete annihilation of his soul. Right now, Tianji is already beyond redemption. What? The other three who had been looking at Zhang Lunhui's actions with hope instantly let out a shocked exclamation. This person who came in is really vicious and merciless. And his strength is probably not something you can deal with. Zhang Lunhui stood up slowly. His long black hair suddenly moved without any wind, dancing in the air. Find me a secret chamber. The three of you guard me. I want to recover my peak strength in the shortest time possible. Right now, what the Zhang family needs is an unparalleled super expert, and not a legend who can reach the peak. Zhang Lunhui's tone was filled with an extremely repressed killing intent. Move out all members of the Zhang family. He had to find out who was the one behind today's incident. Once we find this person, we must kill him at all costs. Annihilate his entire family. If necessary, I will take action personally, spoiling the plans of my Zhang family for thousands of years. For such actions, even death is not enough. Zhang Lunhui said slowly, enunciating each word clearly. As he spoke, a terrifying green light suddenly shot out from his eyes. It was almost completely solidified as he looked at the void in front of him. Old ancestor, rest assured. This vengeance, our Zhang family must definitely avenge it. The killing intent in Zhang Yishao and Zhang Tu's eyes also shot up. Even if the entire Zhang family has to fight to the death, this vengeance must be avenged. For generations to come, we must remember this vengeance in our hearts. Carve it into our souls. No matter who it is, as long as we find out who it is, our entire family, old and young, friends and relatives, must not be spared. Zhang Lunhui did not make a sound. He looked at the mess here and said indifferently, immediately seal off this place. In particular, he wanted to completely block off this space. Do not allow any traces to be left. Then Zhang Lunhui turned and left, without the slightest bit of reluctance. But from his increasingly hurried footsteps, it could be seen that Zhang Lunhui's emotions were definitely not as calm as he appeared. When he reached the door, Zhang Lunhui paused for a moment, then let out a long sigh and walked out slowly and heavily. On the ground he passed, a drop of water formed from a tear fell onto the ground, and slowly seeped down. There was one thing he did not say: 10,000 years of hope, destroyed just like that. If I had known this earlier, why would I insist on coming back here? Looking at Zhang Lunhui's bleak back view, Zhang Yishao and the rest felt as if there was a mountain pressing down on their hearts. A series of hurried footsteps rang out, and the Zhang family's family head, Zhang Wuyun, rushed in like a crazed demon. When he saw the horrifying scene in the stone chamber, he suddenly froze. His face turned green and white a few times, and his mouth was wide open as he unconsciously let out sounds. Suddenly, he spat out a large mouthful of blood and collapsed onto the ground. Zhang Wuyun was completely unable to bear such a huge blow. He actually fainted on the spot, and only after he fainted did 2 streams of tears fall from his eyes. All his hopes, all his preparations, all his hard work, all turned into bubbles. How could he, as the patriarch of the Jean family, endure this? This was his greatest dream and hope in his life. Let's go as well. Jean Yizhao's usual smile was also gone. Replacing it was a face full of sorrow. The other two nodded silently. Then the three of them carried Zhang Wuyun's body and walked out together. What they didn't know was that the vow they swore out of anger today would actually come true in the future. Even if the entire Zhang family has to fight to the death, this vengeance must still be avenged. This vow was extremely powerful and resonating. But they would never have imagined that the first half of this vow, the entire Zhang family has to die, would actually come true, but the second half, we will definitely avenge this grudge, did not come true. As you wish, I will definitely let the entire Zhang family have to die, but as for whether you can avenge this grudge, don't hold too much hope. After all, it's a very unrealistic thing. Jun Moxie, who was hidden in the void, laughed coldly. He watched as the few heavyweights of the Zhang family disappeared angrily outside the stone door. Then, with a loud crashing sound, the entire stone chamber was shut from the outside. The light in the room instantly dimmed, returning to darkness. A moment later, large amounts of rocks poured in like a torrential rain. Outside, there were no less than a few hundred experts of the Zhang family. Large amounts of rocks and soil poured in, large amounts of rocks fell continuously, and dust rose into the air. The originally empty space disappeared at a speed visible to the naked eye. After another moment, this stone chamber that was filled with the truth of evil was finally completely filled up. No matter which faction it was, they would not be able to find any more evidence. As for Jun Dashao, he only left when the stone chamber was filled to 90%. In Jun Moxie's calculations, he did not intend to use this place as any evidence. From the way he saw it, the destruction of the Zhang family did not require any evidence. If they wanted to kill, then kill. What evidence did they need? The so-called evidence was just something that the powerful wanted to show their impartiality to the public. For the evil prince, it was completely meaningless. So what if others did not believe him? As long as he could do it himself, it was fine. Compared to the Zhang family who were searching for the murderer like crazy, Jun Dashao continued to infiltrate the underground world of the Zhang family very calmly. Firstly, he had not achieved the basic goal of this trip. Secondly, Chapter 990. Completely destroying the Zhang family's evil residence, stopping the Zhang family's despicable act of changing feng shui. He believed that this was a good thing for both the Misty Mansion and the Miao family. If the Misty Mansion did not need to be in turmoil, the Miao family would also be safe. Jun Emosie's actions today could be said to have done a great deed for the Misty Illusory Manor, which was akin to giving them a new lease of life. But Jun Dashao did not feel much satisfaction in his heart, because this great deed to him was just a side effect. As mentioned earlier, this was just a coincidence. After all, Dashao's real purpose of coming here had not been achieved yet. After interrogating a few more people, Jun Moxie finally stood in another mysterious place. The place in front of him was filled with darkness, filled with a strange and eerie atmosphere. Ghostly cries could be heard, making one's hair stand on end. Dashao's vision was not affected by the darkness. He had already noticed that on the stone wall in front of him there were 5 big words carved: 9 Nether Refining Soul Road. This place did not seem to have any signs of life. Even the 5 big words were dead gray, filled with a gloomy atmosphere. It seemed like this was the 9 Nether Refining Soul Road specially built by the Zhang family to train the minds of their young disciples. Jun Moxie did not hesitate and floated in. Along the way, the dazzling array of facilities was still filled with an eerie atmosphere. Jun Moxie was calm. He could basically tell what these facilities were for with one look. To put it bluntly, if these were placed in his previous life, they would basically be leftovers from the so-called Kingdom of the Dead. For example, the ghostly pupils and the sharp whistling sound seemed to be able to capture one's soul, but it was actually an effect created by using the principle of optical refraction. Then, a relatively thin gap was opened up on the stone wall to allow the wind to pour in, forming a special wind vent. At most, a few dozen wind whistles that could make sharp sounds were installed in the wind vent, and everything would be fine. However, the piles of white bones on the ground that were emitting phosphorescence were not man-made. They were the real bones of dead people. Here, from top to bottom, almost all the paths were filled with traps. Moreover, each stage was more difficult than the one before, and each stage was more sinister and terrifying than the one before. As long as one accidentally touched any one of them, the attack that followed would be enough to trigger the other mechanisms in a very short period of time. Throwing knives, rocks, poisonous smoke, pitfalls, hooks, and the ghostly howls of the wind accompanied him at all times. Every single stage was sufficient to cause the person who passed through to fall into a predicament with a slim chance of survival. There was absolutely no viciousness in holding back. Only after passing through this trial and heading to the next trial would they have the opportunity to rest and recover. But even if they were given time to rest, they could not stay in a fixed place for more than an hour. Once 1 hour passed, the passage would become more dangerous than any of the other stages. The person from the Zhan clan who designed this 9 nether refining soul road is indeed a genius. But he is also a vicious and ruthless person. These facilities naturally had no effect on Jun Dashao. This was not entirely because Dashao was in the void state of the yin-yang escape. Also, the mental torture and training he had gone through in his previous life had already made him treat everything in front of him like it was child's play. But not everyone had the same methods and experience as Jun Moxie. One could imagine if it was an ordinary person who came in, even if it wasn't certain death, it would at least be a slim chance of survival. Fortunately, they hadn't been killed by the mechanisms and had already been scared to death by the sinister atmosphere of this place. Jun Moxie flew past 3 stages like a hot knife through butter. Then, he could vaguely hear the faint sound of voices coming from the front. Looks like these 2 brothers of the Zhan clan could be considered to have some perseverance. They had actually gone so far in. Jun Moxie pursed his lips and continued forward. Big brother, this damned place is a little too scary. How did this happen? In the darkness, Zhan Yushu hugged his chest, his entire body trembling. His eyes were filled with fear. This originally handsome and elegant young master was now dressed in rags, his hair was disheveled, and his face had turned green. He looked even more horrifying than a malicious spirit. Calm your mind. Although this place is eerie and frightening, it is still a kind of test. The real challenge is still those mechanisms. Don't bother about the rest, and you won't be afraid. Zhan Qingfeng's voice rang out. Don't be fooled by his preaching, but one could definitely tell that this kid was merely pretending to be calm. His voice was also faintly trembling. Ever since they entered this place, the 2 brothers had worked together and had already made it to the 5th stage. Although it had only taken them a day and a half of the night. But in this 1 day and night, the 2 of them had already been on the verge of breaking down countless times. If not for the fact that the 2 brothers could support and encourage each other, they would have broken down completely long ago. This was naturally due to the fact that the Zhan family still valued these 2 up-and-coming youngsters, not letting them enter alone, but in pairs. If they had entered this path alone, either of these 2 pampered brothers would have broken down a long time ago. This matter is all because of that Mo Junyi. If I can pass this stage and see the light of day again, I will definitely not let him off. Zhan Yushu's voice was already filled with rage. Clearly, his hatred for Jun Xie had caused him to instantly resist the terrifying setup of the 9 nether refining soul road and feel a strong sense of fear. Yushu, I've thought about it a few times. This matter is really very strange. Zhan Qingfeng's hatred for that free and natural physique was also stirred up by him, but he said in a deep voice, perhaps it was because it happened too suddenly, and I was only filled with the feeling of failure and humiliation, so I didn't think too much about it. But now that I think about it, every situation that happened that day and night replayed in my mind, and I realized that something was wrong. Right now, they had just passed the 5th stage and were resting. When they spoke at the start, there was an unconcealable fatigue in their voices. But now, they were clearly much more energetic, and even their voices had calmed down. Strange? Something's wrong? Big brother, What do you mean by something's wrong? Zhan Yushu gritted his teeth. It's still that sentence. As long as I can get out, I will definitely make that bastard Mo Junyi die a horrible death. And that little slut, Miao Xiao Miao, I will definitely make her fall into my hands and become my exclusive slave. I will make that slut beg for death. I will use the most humiliating and cruel methods to treat her, to let her know that I, Zhan Yushu, am not someone that a slut like her can afford to offend. To actually be so intimate with that damned Mo Junyi in a single day. If I had known that this slut was so lewd, I would have subdued her long ago. To think that she wears a veil every day, pretending to be a pure and chaste saint. Turns out that she's actually a slut from head to toe. From Zhan Yushu's tone, his hatred towards Miao Xiao Miao actually exceeded that of Mo Junyi. This was really unexpected. It really didn't make sense. In the darkness, Zhan Qingfeng seemed to frown and his voice was a little displeased. Yushu, your thinking is a little too extreme. That Miao Xiao Miao did not do anything wrong, right? I naturally know that you yearn for her day and night, yearn for her in your dreams. But she did not do anything wrong. For you to push the blame onto her, isn't it a little, did not do anything wrong? Her liking Mo Junyi is already the biggest mistake. Zhan Yushu screamed crazily, the veins on his neck bulging out. In this completely dark place, Zhan Yushu finally exploded with the evil and desire he had been suppressing in his heart. She should be mine. She can only be mine. In this lifetime, she can only be in my bed. For me to use as I please. It is an unforgivable sin for any other man to even touch a finger of hers. No one is an exception. Shut up. Shut up. Zhan Qingfeng's voice was filled with rage. In the darkness, there was a moment of silence. After a long while, Zhan Yushu's mocking laughter rang out. Big brother, you finally can't hold it in anymore? Hearing me blaspheme the goddess in your heart, you finally can't hold it in anymore? Pa. He laughed maniacally and said, you've always had designs on Miao Xiao Miao. Do you think that I really don't know? Perhaps you've hidden it very well, but every time you see Miao Xiao Miao, although you look like an old man on the surface, the moment Miao Xiao Miao turns around, your eyes look as if you want to strip her naked. Big brother, you've been trying so hard to control yourself every day. Aren't you tired of being so hypocritical? Aren't you tired? And the most tiring thing for you is, you're afraid that I will find out, afraid that others will find out about your designs on Miao Xiao Miao. But do you know? Actually, everyone knows. What a joke. Right now, the two of US brothers can be said to be at the end of the world, but you still want to hide it? You're really too useless. Zhan Yushu ridiculed his respected big brother to his heart's content, as if he had gone mad. These two brothers are really hopeless. Jun Moxie shook his head secretly. Things had already come to this, and the two brothers were still fighting for a woman's affections, and the object of their jealousy was actually a woman who had already fallen in love with someone else. Jun Moxie couldn't help but be impressed. A man's lust was indeed incomparably powerful. Fuck your mother's fart. So what if I like her? So what if I want to have her? Is this wrong? She is the goddess in my heart. If you dare to insult her again, I'll kill you. Zhan Qingfeng's voice also became agitated as he roared. You're finally willing to speak the truth. It's naturally your freedom to like whoever you like, but you shouldn't keep creating opportunities for me on the surface, keep showing that you don't care. But, Zhan Yushu panted heavily and finally exploded. But you shouldn't be so fucking hypocritical, creating opportunities for me, but in the end, it always becomes your own opportunity. On the surface, you're doing everything you can to help me, but secretly, you're using me as a stepping stone. Do you think I'm stupid? Do you really think I don't know? You said that I'm blaspheming her, but the one who's really blaspheming that goddess is me? I said that you're the one. Chapter 991. Don't say any more. Zhan Qingfeng's voice was low and gloomy. Following this angry shout, there was no other sound in the passageway, only the sound of heavy breathing. After a long time, Zhan Qingfeng said slowly, if we can get out this time, if the family's plan succeeds and the Miao family is defeated, I will have a fair competition with you. Competition? What competition? Zhang Yushu also seemed to have forgotten the unhappiness from earlier. His voice suddenly turned lewd as he said, Big brother, don't tell me that you still think that that woman is some goddess even now. The Miao family's fall is already inevitable. Miao Xiao Miao will fall into our hands sooner or later. Why should we two brothers compete? Since it's just a cheap woman, then why don't we brothers share her? Sure? The moment Zhang Qingfeng heard these words, he wanted to curse out loud. But for some reason, after saying these 3 words, he suddenly felt an unprecedented perverted joy, even excitement, as if he was looking forward to it very much. For a moment, he didn't know how to respond to such a whimsical and bizarre idea, and Zhang Yushu saw that he was not saying anything and knew that he had already agreed. He couldn't help but excitedly talk about how he was going to abuse and play with this #1 beauty of the Misty Mansion. Let's not talk about this. Our biggest enemy is still that brat. Let's analyze Mo Junyi first. Zhang Qingfeng's words were very hesitant, very weak, and even had a hint of reluctance. But Zhang Yushu didn't say anything else. Jun Moxie had already found the exact location of these 2 people. Hearing that they were planning to profane Miao Xiao Miao like this, an indescribable rage rose in his heart. He was just about to kill these 2 people when he suddenly heard them talking about him. He couldn't help but pause. Killing them is as easy as lifting a finger. Let's hear what they have to say about me first. Yes, you said earlier that there's something strange about Mo Junyi. What's strange about him? What exactly is wrong with him? Zhang Yushu finally picked up this topic. His voice was relaxed. Clearly, the venting just now was beneficial to his body and mind, although it was just fantasizing. Mo Junyi, 18 years old, born in a poor family. His parents are both dead. It said that he ate some kind of treasure in the mountains when he was young, which allowed him to maintain the free and natural physique. Originally, he was a disciple of an unknown Earth Xian cultivator. Later on, he was discovered by Chao Guofeng in Chrysanthemum City. Because he was a rare talent, it caused a great battle between the Misty Illusory Manor and the 3 Holy Lands. But due to some other accident, he went missing. Coincidentally, when Chao Guofeng was about to return to the Misty Illusory Manor, he discovered the heavily injured Mo Junyi. And the enemy made use of Mo Junyi to lay a trap, wanting to kill the 7 Saint Emperors in one fell swoop. Chao Guofeng and the rest fought viciously before they managed to bring this person back to the Misty Illusory Manor. After that, Manor Lord used the 7-colored holy fruit to save him. After that, Zhang Qingfeng was talking about the records of the free and natural physique of Mo Junyi in the Misty Mansion. That's right. But there's something wrong with it. Zhang Yushu said loudly. What do you mean by that? Think carefully. When that kid was competing with us, whether it was the 4 arts, calligraphy, painting, or expression, which part of him resembled a country bumpkin from a poor family? Zhang Qingfeng had been thinking about that scene for the past few days. And after thinking about it, he finally realized something. This doesn't mean anything. Zhang Yushu said. Perhaps he learned it from his master. Who knows? His master is only an Earth Xian. Zhang Qingfeng snorted. An Earth Xian, even if he's extremely talented, how much can he use? Yushu, you and I grew up in a big family like the Zhan family. We've been exposed to these things since we first learned how to speak. But ask yourself how you compare to Mo Junyi? Ask yourself how you can compare to him in any aspect? What's so strange about that? He has the free and natural physique. His talent is naturally higher. Zhang Yushu pursed his lips. Although the free and natural physique is a miraculous physique that only exists in the legends, it's only a condition for cultivating Xian Qi. It doesn't mean that it's omnipotent. According to the records, even the 9 Nether first young master from 10,000 years ago was not as talented as the current Mo Junyi. Zhang Qingfeng said darkly. But how old was the 9 Nether first young master then? And Mo Junyi was only 18 years old. He's already beyond the realm of a genius. He's an all-rounder. That means, Big Brother, you're actually suspecting his identity? Zhang Yushu asked suspiciously. I'm not the only one who's suspecting it. Zhan Qingfeng chuckled. In the entire Misty Mansion, there are definitely many who suspect the identity of this free and natural physique. I even suspect that many people have already sent people out to investigate. When Jun Moxie heard this, his heart couldn't help but skip a beat. His actions yesterday were indeed too high profile. A legendary possessor of the free and natural physique was actually an all-rounder who was proficient in the 4 arts. The 4 arts, poetry, songs, and even gambling. It was really impossible for anyone to not be suspicious, but at that time, the Zhan family brothers had used all sorts of vicious moves and were extremely overbearing. If he had retreated, not only would the consequences be severe, it wouldn't be in line with his character. In the end, it was all because of these 2 bastards. Some time ago, I heard that an unimaginably talented youth had appeared in the Xian continent. That person is only 17 or 18 years old, but he's already able to challenge the 3 holy lands more than once, dominating the entire Xian continent. And with his own strength, he reclaimed the Tian Fa forest, turning a dangerous place like the Tian Fa forest into his personal base. And just a few days ago, he called himself the evil monarch and led hundreds of saints and venerables to battle the 3 holy lands. And the result was a complete victory. The most frightening thing was that the allied army of the 3 holy lands was almost completely annihilated. Zhan Qingfeng's eyes shone with a cold light. It said that this youth, who is only 17 or 18 years old, has already surpassed the 3rd-level Holy Emperor. He killed the 2nd-level Holy Emperor Zhan Mubai, who was using a forbidden technique on hermitage, and he managed to escape unscathed. Zhan Yushu's lips couldn't help but feel a little dry. He licked his lips and said bitterly, "Big brother, are you talking about that Jun Moxie?" "Yes, it is indeed Jun Moxie." Zhan Qingfeng laughed coldly. "He's the only one with such achievements at such a young age. Even the 9 Nether first young master back then was far inferior to him when he was at his age. He's truly the best in the world. This achievement is not only unprecedented, I believe it will never be repeated again." Zhan Yushu sighed dejectedly. "No matter how high his achievements are, it's because he has that kind of ability. Why are you talking about him now?" "Big brother, it's not that I'm belittling myself, but the 2 of us are definitely not comparable to this person." Although Zhan Yushu was also proud of himself as a genius, but compared to this extremely perverse evil monarch, he felt that he was really not worth looking at. So he didn't even feel any jealousy, only a sense of disappointment. That was why he could say these words from the bottom of his heart. "What you said is the truth, and there is naturally no need to doubt it. But did you know that evil monarch Jun Mo Xie, apart from his profound Xian cultivation and shocking cultivation, is also a person with many talents? Poetry, songs, zither, chess, calligraphy, and painting. There's nothing he doesn't know and knows everything." Zhan Qingfeng's eyes flickered. Not long ago, in the famous city of Xian continent, Chrysanthemum City, he once used the alias Dongfang de Shu and composed a song on the spot. It's the song that you usually like to listen to, the song of the smiling, proud, pugilistic world. So this song was composed by him. Zhan Yushu shook his head and said, "And Mo Junyi. The first time he appeared, it was also in Chrysanthemum City." Zhan Qingfeng's heart slowly formed a line as he deduced. He said slowly, "Yushu, do you think that this legendary young genius, the evil monarch, is similar to that old enemy of ours, the great prodigy Mo with the free and natural physique? If so, how similar are they?" As the saying goes, even a wise man will make a mistake at times, and a fool will make a mistake at times. Although Zhan Qingfeng was not a fool, he also made a mistake at times. In such an absurd and wild guess, he actually guessed the true identity of Jun Dashao as if he had hit the jackpot. "What? You're suspecting that he is that? That's impossible, right?" Zhan Yushu's face drained of color as he jumped up. "Why is it impossible? I'm suspecting his true identity." Zhan Qingfeng interrupted him and said fiercely, "This evil monarch is very likely that Mo Junyi, the great prodigy Mo. How is this possible? The difference between the 2 is like heaven and earth, Isn't it a little too great? Zhang Yushu was dumbfounded. That evil monarch is said to have at least the cultivation of the Holy Emperor, or even higher. What the hell is Mo Junyi? This little difference is not enough. There are too many ways to hide one's strength, whether known or unknown. As for changing one's appearance, there are even more. Everyone knows how to change their appearance. It's just that everyone is different in their ingenuity. Zhan Qingfeng said calmly, I've thought about it over and over again. Other than this seemingly inconceivable explanation, I really cannot understand why two geniuses would appear in this world at the same time. Geniuses among geniuses, geniuses that are like miracles. Mo Junyi, evil monarch, Jun Moxie, Zhan Yushu muttered under his breath. Suddenly, his entire body trembled violently. That's right. Mo Junyi is definitely Jun Moxie. Why didn't I think of it before? Big brother, try comparing these two names. Chapter 992. Mo Junyi, the demon monarch is also... Zhan Qingfeng laughed Lingling. I don't care if you are the evil monarch or the demon monarch. Since you've come to the misty mansion, then don't even think of leaving here alive. Yushu, let's retreat immediately and report this matter to the elders in the family. This matter is of utmost importance to the Zhan family and the misty mansion. We must not delay it. Zhan Yushu agreed excitedly, his voice trembling. Without a doubt, if this matter was true, it would be a great merit. What was the evil monarch's motive in coming to the misty mansion? No matter what his motive was, he must be plotting something. As long as they could expose this plot, the status of these two brothers in the misty mansion would definitely rise. It would be a blessing in disguise. In fact, they could even use this opportunity to get rid of Chao Guofeng and the rest. Most importantly, Miao Xiaomiao would definitely be implicated because of this matter. If something happened to Miao Xiaomiao, it would naturally be the Miao family's responsibility. If they continued to think this way, then wouldn't the two of them become the greatest contributors to the Zhan family's entry into the Misty Mansion? What kind of glory would that be? Just as the two brothers were immersed in their fantasies, forgetting all their fear for a moment and becoming complacent, suddenly, the originally dark and gloomy passageway suddenly lit up. This was the Nine Nether's refining soul land that the Zhan family had specially set up to train people's mental fortitude. Lighting had always been forbidden, and it could be said that ever since this place was built, not a single lamp or flame had ever appeared here. Of course, the phosphorescence of corpses was an exception. But right now, a strange flame had appeared in midair, burning quietly. Just a single flame, but it lit up the entire passageway. Only now did Zhan Yushu realize that he'd been leaning on a skeleton, and he couldn't help but jump in fright. But then all their attention was attracted by this mysterious flame that had appeared out of nowhere. The flame floated in the air, burning at a steady pace. Not only did it not burn out, but it also did not fall. It simply floated there. The two Zhan brothers stared blankly. What the hell was going on? The changes happening in front of them were beyond their comprehension. In this originally dark and gloomy tunnel filled with mechanisms, a mystical flame suddenly appeared. Although the surroundings were brightly lit and the field of vision was clear, it made people feel even more terrified. This was the common fear of the unknown. There were very few exceptions, and with the temperament of the two Zhan brothers, there was naturally no exception. Just at this time, a gust of cold air suddenly blew into Zhan Yushu's ears from behind. In that instant, Zhan Yushu's head buzzed, and he felt all the hairs on his body stand on end as he jumped up in shock. Then, a sound similar to the sound of a door opening rang out in the void. With a creak, it was as if the Nine Underworld's door had suddenly opened. This sound was very clear, as if it came from the depths of one's soul. Zhan Qingfeng and his brother both felt that a door had opened, and some terrifying demon was about to walk out from that door. But the most terrifying thing was that that door only existed in the void. Zhan Qingfeng, who was slightly calmer, also had a look of extreme fear in his eyes, and his body was trembling. The fact that the two brothers could still maintain their standing posture after experiencing such an unexpected and terrifying change was already very commendable. At this moment, the two of them locked their gazes firmly on the same direction. In that direction, on the stone wall that seemed to be near yet far, another flickering flame suddenly lit up. Although they could not determine the distance between the flame and their position, the flame was like the sharpest of needles. It appeared abruptly, and then gradually approached as it swayed, continuously enlarging in their pupils. And in the stone wall behind the flame, there was a strange figure dressed in a white robe. It seemed to be pulling out of the stone wall with great difficulty. From the appearance of only one hand, the entire body became flat, and then with a forceful pull, he finally pulled his entire body out of the stone wall. But what was even stranger was that the stone wall was still as flat as before, without a single crack. It was as if this person had appeared out of thin air. When Zhang Qingfeng and Zhang Yushu saw this extremely strange phenomenon, they couldn't help but feel a chill run down their spines. Their eyes widened and their mouths gaped open, but they couldn't even utter a single complete sentence. This strange phenomenon was far from over. That white figure's feet didn't touch the ground, and it floated over slowly. Although the process seemed slow, it was something that could be seen with the naked eye. The two beams of flame had clearly lit up the entire passageway, but no matter how hard the two brothers tried, they couldn't see the face of that strange white figure. It was as if a specter had suddenly appeared in the void. Right now, a sinister feeling that they had never felt before filled the hearts of Zhang Qingfeng and Zhang Yushu. Both of their teeth were chattering uncontrollably. At the same time, a thought that made them more and more afraid appeared in their hearts. Could it be that there really are ghosts in this world? The closer the white figure got, the more Zhang Qingfeng and Zhang Yushu felt terrified. The two of them involuntarily leaned against each other, shivering uncontrollably. Originally, they were still hoping to get some encouragement and support from their brothers, but right now, the only thing they could feel was the trembling of the other party's body. This only increased the inexplicable fear in their hearts, and they became even more afraid. Who exactly are you, to actually play tricks here? Zhang Qingfeng forced himself to remain calm as he questioned. His face was pale, and his teeth were chattering. His eyes were even bigger than a cow's, and there wasn't a single trace of blood on his face. All of this had already betrayed the fear in his heart. Jiji. An extremely sinister laughter rang out from the mouth of that white figure. It was fine when he didn't laugh earlier. At most, he only sounded more like a ghost. But this laugh didn't sound like a human at all, and it directly confirmed the identity of a ghost. Zhang Yushu and Zhang Qingfeng almost fainted from shock. As the white figure got closer, that blurry face that couldn't be seen clearly earlier finally became clearer. Another sinister laughter rang out, and a handsome face finally appeared from behind the flames. Sharp brows, bright eyes, thin lips, black hair, and a cold smile on his face. You two have worked hard. This young man who suddenly appeared had a head full of black hair fluttering in the firelight. He had a very natural and unrestrained smile on his face. With a strange, slightly trembling voice, he said, neither singing nor chanting, "What joy is there in samsara? Who knows how many paths there are in the world of mortals? Since you've entered the 9 nether springs, don't return to the mortal world. Both of you, your time in the mortal world has come to an end. I've specially come to pick you up and send you on your way together." No. Zhang Yushu screamed crazily. Tears and snot flowed down his face. Suddenly, he felt a heat at his crotch, and a stream gushed out. His entire body collapsed to the ground like a pile of mud. He couldn't use any strength at all, and he didn't know what to say. He didn't even know how to beg for mercy. He only knew how to keep saying no, and saliva was already flowing out from the corner of his mouth. After a while, he suddenly screamed at the top of his lungs. Ghost. In comparison, although Zhang Qingfeng was also trembling all over, he was much calmer. He looked at this handsome face that didn't seem to belong to the mortal world and asked, "May I ask who you are?" This seat is naturally the Soul Reaper. You're calmer than him. This seat admires people with guts, but The white-robed youth smiled warmly. Suddenly, his head disappeared. In front of Zhang Qingfeng and Zhang Yushu, there was only a headless body floating in midair, but a voice rang out clearly. Admiring is one thing, but there are still proper matters to attend to. The two of you brothers have committed many evil deeds. Today, your time in the mortal world has come to an end. The netherworld has ordered me to come and arrest the two of you. Go to the 18 levels of hell and suffer all kinds of torture to atone for your sins in this life. Talking but without a head. Without a head, he was still talking. Just what organ was he using to speak? Zhang Yushu's eyes widened in horror, his eyeballs bulging out continuously. Other than this action, he didn't know anything else. Zhang Qingfeng, who was shocked by this turn of events, was so scared that his legs were cramping. His eyeballs almost popped out of their sockets and dropped to the ground. His brain was clearly telling him not to look anymore, but he couldn't turn his eyes away no matter what. In that instant, his entire body turned cold, and goosebumps rose all over his body as the white silhouette spoke. Its two legs strangely disappeared, and then its waist, leaving only two parts of its body, one upper and one lower. It floated back and forth, bringing with it an eerie gust of wind, and the cries of ghosts and gods resounded once more. How could Zhang Yushu endure such a horrifying sight? With a groan, his eyes rolled back, and he fainted weakly. White foam spewed out of his mouth, and his body twitched uncontrollably. Zhang Qingfeng's eyes also rolled back. He wanted to stand up and yell, using his own yang qi to chase this ghost away. But his two legs were as soft as noodles. Not to mention standing up, he couldn't even stretch his legs. Even if he forced himself to stand up, he didn't seem to have any yang qi at all. The two of them seemed to have already confirmed that this handsome youth in front of them, who didn't seem to belong to the human world, was really a ghost, and a soul reaper who had come to capture them. They had no choice but to believe it. The scene before them did not seem to belong to the human world at all. It was too horrifying, too fantastical, so useless to actually faint just like that. The white figure let out a heartfelt sigh of disdain. Then, Zhang Qingfeng saw with his own eyes that with a swoosh, his two legs actually grew out again. Then with a swoosh sound, his waist grew again. Finally, with a swoosh, his head also appeared. This guy didn't seem to be satisfied. He stretched out both his hands and straightened his head. It seemed like he had accidentally grown crooked when he came out earlier. Since he had grown crooked, he naturally had to straighten his head. Otherwise, he wouldn't be pretty anymore. Jun Moxie had always known how to deal the greatest blow to a person, both physically and mentally. This was what Zhang Qingfeng cared about the most right now. But what Jun Dashao said was the truth. Even though he was arrogant, he was only stating an objective fact. Zhang Qingfeng spat out a mouthful of blood and laughed bitterly. Do you really think you can get away with it? Evil Monarch, what a great name you have. But that little bit of strength of yours is worthless in the eyes of our Misty Mansion, in the eyes of our Zhan family. You won't be able to withstand our rage. Nodding his head, Jun Moxie admitted openly. If I fight to the death with you right now, I admit that it's indeed not possible. But why should I fight to the death with you? But the rage of your Zhan family is just that. I really don't care about it. Oh right, it seems like you still don't know about the sudden incident in the Zhan family. And it seems like our relationship right now is very good. But once your identity is exposed, how can you still be good? Our Zhan family is like the sun in the sky, and our strength is the strongest in the Misty Mansion. And you still dare to say that you don't care? Who do you think you are? Zhang Qingfeng laughed sinisterly. That makes sense. The Zhan family's strength is indeed very shocking. Jun Moxie sighed. But perhaps I will be very miserable in the future, but you are destined to never see it. Zhang Qingfeng, don't tell me you think that I'm only here to catch up with you today? You want to kill me? Zhang Qingfeng suddenly calmed down. I know that I'm not your match, but do you know how many people in the Misty Mansion are suspecting your identity? How many have already sent people out to investigate? As long as your identity is revealed, You won't end up any better than me. He actually laughed gleefully. Right now, you can be said to be in grave danger. And your only way out is to join my Jean family. With our Jean family's strength, we can protect your life. And now, you actually want to kill me? You really don't know how the word death is written. Jun Moxie was truly dumbfounded this time. Does this young master Zhan Qingfeng have any brains? Didn't he hear what I said earlier? Who would have thought that this fellow would still have such an undying ambition even at such a critical moment of life and death? Jun Moxie really didn't know whether to laugh or admire him. As long as you're willing to surrender to the Zhan family, I can even give you Miao Xiao Miao. How is it? This condition is very good, right? Zhan Qingfeng's eyes shone with hope. Just at this time, a tragic cry rang out from the ground. Zhan Yushu slowly woke up and started wailing. Spare me! Spare me! This is all my big brother's idea. It has nothing to do with me, ah? This brat was actually scared to the point of losing his mind. The moment he opened his eyes, Jun Emosia abruptly leaned over and cackled strangely. Opening his mouth, he let out a loud howl. Zhan Yushu had just woken up when he heard a sinister and ghastly cackle, and then a bloody mouth suddenly appeared on top of his head. In that instant, he didn't even have the time to determine where he was. He only thought that he was already dead and in hell, about to be eaten by a ferocious beast. He couldn't help but let out a long sigh. Then his face suddenly turned green and then green. His head tilted to the side, and then there was no more sound, only a stream of green liquid flowed out of his mouth. This fellow was actually scared out of his wits by Jun Dashao's tricks and died a violent death. Zhan Qingfeng was still passionately trying to persuade him, feeling that he had already grasped the rhythm of survival. He was about to continue speaking when he saw his own brother being scared to death in front of him. In that instant, his mind suddenly went blank. Jun Emosia leisurely stood up and looked down from above. Then he slowly said in a domineering tone, I have no interest in continuing to fight with you right now. You are indeed stronger than Zhan Yushu. Because you will not be scared to death by me. But I really don't know if you heard what I said just now. I said that your Zhan family's anger is actually just a small matter, and I really don't care. These words are not arrogant words. Because in reality, I have already provoked the greatest anger of your Zhan family. And I really don't care, completely don't care. Oh right, you still don't know what happened to your Zhan family? Go to the real Yellow Springs with your questions. Zhan Qingfeng could clearly feel the murderous aura emanating from Jun Moxie's body. When he heard these words, he couldn't help but be tongue-tied. In front of his own brother's corpse, he actually forgot about his anger and sorrow. Under Jun Moxie's sharp gaze, he only felt his entire body turn cold, and his heart was filled with fear. This farce of yours has really exposed me a lot, and all of this could have been avoided. So, your sins are unforgivable, and you will not rest until you die. Jun Moxie said indifferently, Originally, what your Zhan family did in the Misty Mansion, and how many heinous things you did, had nothing to do with me. But you almost ruined my plans, and that is the road to death for you. Or rather, the Zhan family's decline started because of you brothers. If there's a next life, remember this. Jun Moxie said indifferently, Do not ever go against me again. After he finished speaking, he waved his hand lightly, and Zhan Qingfeng's entire body suddenly spasmed. Slowly, an incredulous expression of fright appeared on his face, and that green liquid also flowed out of the corner of his mouth. Just from the surface, the cause of his death was undoubtedly the same as Zhan Yushu's. Both died from fright. Jun Moxie waited quietly for a while, confirming that there wasn't anything like a soul on these two people, or that it had already dissipated. Only then did his body sway and quietly disappear. Soul ripples, spirit seeds, holy infant, and the like were all high-level things that would only appear when one's cultivation had reached the level of the Holy Emperor, or even above the Holy Emperor. With Zhan Yushu and Zhan Qingfeng's insignificant cultivation, they were far from qualified to condense that kind of thing. Once they died, everything would naturally be for naught. After another while, Jun Moxie finally came out from the underground world of the Zhan family. No one knew what he did in the underground world after killing Zhang Qingfeng and Zhang Yushu. Jun Moxie rose from the underground world of the Zhan family. When he looked around, he could see that the earth chi of the Misty Mansion had already undergone an obvious change. The Miao family's luck had changed from its previous decline, and it was even slowly recovering. As for the Zhan family's aura that was previously as bright as the sun in the sky, it had become much dimmer. As for that sinister yin chi that young Master Jun hated so much, it had already disappeared without a trace. The theory of feng shui is actually so mystical. It had only just ended below, and not much time had passed. But there were already immediate results above, and earth-shattering changes had occurred. Jun Mo sighed. Only now did he realize that the sun was already setting in the west, and the sky would turn completely dark in a short period of time. Chapter 994. Jun Moxie suddenly recalled that when he parted ways with Miao Xiao Miao last night, Miss Miao had said that she was going to look for him today to get the score for the Song of the Burial of Flowers. Miao Xiao Miao would definitely know about the gathering of the big shots in the morning. Naturally, she would not go. But in the afternoon, with that lass's personality, she would definitely not be able to hold herself back. Most people would not barge into his room, but Miao Xiao Miao was not one of them. If she found out that he was not in the room, things would get messy. Jun Mo became anxious as he thought of this. He didn't dare to be negligent and used the yin-yang escape with all his might. He disappeared from the sky with a chhuaj sound and returned to Chao Guifeng's courtyard at lightning speed. The Zhan family had gone completely crazy. In the misty, illusory manner, regardless of whether it was the people from the aristocratic families or the commoners, everyone could clearly feel this change. Within the 7 cities, all the experts belonging to the Zhan family, as long as they had the strength of Tianxian and above, all rushed back at the same time. Those who were close to the destination simply used their Xian Qi and used their movement techniques to rush back. In some places, some of the Zhan family's shops were temporarily closed due to the absence of the people in charge. One must know that this was not just 1 or 2 shops. All the Zhan family's businesses had stopped operating at the same time. Even if it was just for a day, the damage to the Zhan family was immeasurable. But the Zhan family could not care so much anymore. They just kept transferring their forces back, as if they didn't care about the huge loss of wealth at all. All the experts of the Zhan family were gathered here. The level of security around the Zhan family's outer perimeter had also reached a level that left everyone dumbfounded in just a short period of time. Right now, it could be said that even a mosquito could not enter or leave the Zhan family freely. Even on the outskirts of the Zhan family, there were many people whose swords were stained with blood, glaring at them. On the ground, there were piles and piles of corpses of rats and snakes. These were all unlucky creatures that crawled underground when the Zhan family was in full lockdown. All of them were caught and killed without exception. What had happened to the Zhan family? Even rats and snakes were not spared. All the aristocratic families were trying to find out what had happened to the Zhan family for them to make such a crazy move. But no matter what it was, the Zhan family must have suffered a huge blow. They had completely hurt the Zhan family. That's why they acted this way. There was no doubt about this. However, in the entire Misty Mansion, which family had this kind of power? To be able to target the strongest family in the Misty Mansion, the Zhan family, and even cause them to suffer heavy losses and injuries. The more sensitive powers also began to mobilize their forces. Because with the Zhan family's mobilization, the entire Misty Mansion's atmosphere had become unprecedentedly tense. If something were to happen, it would be a reshuffle of the upper echelons of power in the Misty Mansion. If they didn't make preparations in advance, they would inevitably become cannon fodder. It was especially so for the Miao family. The atmosphere at this moment was truly delicate, and it had long since reached a state of mutual hostility. In fact, everyone knew that with the rise of the Zhan family's main opponent was only the Miao family. Only by getting rid of the Miao family could the Zhan family rise in power. This was no longer a secret. It was just that both families had maintained restraint in the past. But today, as time passed, The atmosphere from the Zhan family also became more and more tense. And this tense atmosphere, when the sun was about to set, actually reached a certain peak. Following an earth-shattering roar, the Zhan family's side suddenly erupted with a bone-chilling power. An unprecedentedly powerful aura hovered above the Zhan family's residence for a while. It was mixed with a towering rage, instantly enveloping the surrounding 1,000 miles. The Zhan family actually had such a shocking expert hidden in their midst. All the aristocratic families felt a chill in their hearts. After the Zhan family discovered the changes in the 9 nether soul refinement, the mysterious deaths of the 2 rising stars, Zhan Qingfeng and Zhan Yushu, became the straw that broke the camel's back. And Zhan Lunhui, who had yet to break through, suddenly exploded. This kind of explosion was equivalent to going berserk, almost causing Zhan Lunhui to be consigned to eternal damnation. It was really one thing after another, without the slightest pause, and all of it was bad news. Zhan Lunhui, who had been suppressing and restraining himself, finally could not hold it in any longer and completely exploded. At this moment, blood was flowing from the corner of his mouth. The aura around his body was abnormally berserk. He slumped on the ground. On his body, there were thin lines of blood flowing out because of the ruptured meridians. He stared with his eyes wide open. He angrily muttered to himself, "What a bully! This is too much. This is too much, fucking. But he didn't know that at the same time, Chao Guofeng was also throwing a huge tantrum in his own courtyard. The reason was that Miao Xiao Miao, who had been cooped up for the entire morning, had already arrived punctually to look for Mo Junyi in the afternoon. Because of Jun Moxie's special instructions, the servants naturally did not dare to barge in. And Miao Xiao Miao was also too embarrassed to barge into a young man's bedroom. So she pretended to be magnanimous and waited outside, but when the first and second wait did not come out, Miao Xiao Miao finally started to get anxious. Little Beansprout even volunteered to barge in to check, only to discover that there was only a pillow hidden in the blanket, and the free and natural physique great prodigy Mo was nowhere to be seen. This discovery was no small matter. Little Beansprout's face turned pale as she scrambled out of the room, her expression completely changed. The moment she explained the situation, Miao Xiao Miao was extremely anxious, and all the servants in Holy Emperor Chao's courtyard were also completely pale. Right at this moment, Chao Guofeng and the rest of the 7 brothers returned with faces full of joy. They had returned with hearts full of joy, but they just happened to run into this messy situation. Even the usually good-tempered Chao Guofeng couldn't help but fly into a rage. He scolded these useless fellows for not even being able to look after a single person. Apart from his rage, his heart was also burning with anxiety. Could something have happened to that child? So the 7 brothers left one person behind to look after him, while the other 6 split up to search, and in the process of searching, the Zhan family erupted. This time, Chao Guofeng was even more worried. Right now, the Zhan family's eyes were obviously bloodshot. If someone from the Zhan family really met Mo Junyi and casually killed him, that would definitely not be a strange thing. Furthermore, who knew if Mo Junyi's disappearance was caused by the Zhan family? Didn't they see how they were gathering manpower at all costs? If something was wrong, there must be something wrong. The more he thought about it, the more he couldn't help but think of the worst. With Holy Emperor Chao's anger soaring to the heavens, and with Bai Qifeng adding oil to the fire, the guesses had already evolved into the Zhan family capturing Mo Junyi to be cooked and eaten, gathering everyone to ask for a share. In a fit of rage, Chao Guofeng immediately gathered helpers and prepared to barge into the Zhan family to demand for him, but at the very last moment of life and death. Jun Dashao had rushed back. If he had returned a step later, things would have really gotten out of hand. The world war in the Misty Mansion would definitely have erupted because of his disappearance, this time, not to mention anything else. Just Chao Guofeng and the other Saint Emperors were truly enraged. Once they faced the Zhan family's people whose rage had already reached the peak, there was no need to say anything. That would really be the end of the world. Where the hell did you run off to? Why doesn't anyone know that you went out? Hearing Chao Guofeng's angry question, Jun Mo Xie knew that this old man was truly anxious. Even though he was angry, There was a hint of heartfelt concern in his voice. Behind Chao Guofeng, Miao Xiao Miao's beautiful eyes were staring at him with pleasant surprise. Her originally clear eyes were slightly red and swollen. Without even asking, he could guess that this lass had clearly cried because she hadn't been able to find him for a long time. No matter if she was worried or upset, she must have cried, "I didn't go far. I wanted to take a nap, but I couldn't fall asleep no matter what. Feeling bored, I snuck out for a stroll. I don't know why, but after a short stroll, I felt a little tired again. And I took a nap at the foot of that hill in front." June Emosia stretched lazily and said, "I have to say, the feeling of sleeping under the sun is truly comfortable. If it wasn't for the fact that the sun was setting and the ants were returning to their nests to cause trouble, perhaps I would have slept a little longer." Chao Guofeng was instantly stunned. All the people on his side were about to go crazy from anxiety. This fellow actually went to find a place to sleep? Wasn't this a little too heartless? But facing this fellow's lazy smile that was asking for a beating, Chao Guofeng, Bai Qifeng, and the rest were completely speechless. They didn't seem to bear to scold? Still couldn't bear to. What a joke. Being able to see him return safely was already the greatest consolation. All the anxiety and anger in their hearts had long dissipated. Right now, there was only boundless joy in their hearts. How could they bear to scold or beat him? If they hurt him or scolded him, wouldn't they be even more worried? But if they didn't beat or scold him, were they really going to let this lazy brat off just like that? If they really didn't punish him, if this brat developed such a lazy habit in the future, that would be a very bad thing. Unwilling to let go, unwilling to let go. Just when the old fellows were unable to make up their minds, Jun Dashao, who was such an eye-catching person, quickly changed the topic. Only to see Dashao walking towards Miao Xiao Miao with a smile on his face. He said softly, "You're here? That was just a bunch of nonsense. The person is already standing in front of you, and you're still asking if he's here? If he's not here, is the person standing in front of you a ghost?" But it was precisely this nonsense that broke the seemingly delicate stalemate. Miao Xiao Miao looked at him, a trace of shyness flashing past her eyes. Then she lowered her head lightly and let out an almost inaudible "n" sound from her nostrils. If that thin veil was removed, one would probably be able to see that Miao Xiao Miao's face had already turned red all the way to her neck. This bashful and pitiful look? How was this the same young Miss Miao from last night? Jun Emosia was extremely puzzled in his heart. Last night, this lass had almost pushed me down and forced herself on me. Chapter 995. Jun Dashao didn't know that Miao Xiao Miao felt even more embarrassed because she recalled what happened last night. Thinking of how she had abandoned all her female modesty and boldly confessed her feelings to him, and even forced Jun Moxie to give in, how could Miao Xiao Miao not be embarrassed when she saw him again today? Although she had just experienced a dangerous change from death to life, and couldn't control the feelings in her heart, so she confessed her feelings. But now that Miao Xiao Miao thought about it, she still felt that her whole body was feverish. Before coming here today, she was still looking forward to meeting this enemy, but after arriving here, she only received the news that her sweetheart had unexpectedly disappeared. In addition to panic, she didn't remember her previous thoughts. But now that her sweetheart was safe and sound in front of her, she was filled with happiness, but only endless shyness. Seeing the man and woman facing each other, the man was smiling helplessly, but the woman was so shy that she didn't dare to raise her head. She only knew how to draw circles on the ground with the tip of her toes, and her pair of jade-like hands were almost rubbing the hem of her clothes. Chao Guofeng and the others smiled bitterly at each other. Under such circumstances, should we old fellows still force ourselves to stay here? The two of them were looking at each other and talking about love. The two of them were enough. If we stayed here, we would be 7 extra large light bulbs. It seemed that this situation wasn't suitable to teach a disciple a lesson, right? Without waiting for a reminder, and without needing a reminder, Chao Guofeng waved his hand and said, not knowing whether to laugh or cry, "Let's go, let's go." "What are you looking at? What's there to see?" "Go do what you should be doing." The group of old fellows, some shook their heads, some smiled bitterly, some sighed, and some smiled ambiguously, Then they all dispersed. Today's weather is really good, the sun is really big. June Moxie looked at the beauty in front of him, but didn't say a word. He just rubbed the hem of his clothes, laughed twice, and casually said some nonsense. Today's weather is really good, the sun is really big. Meow Xiao Meow finally replied, but the content of her reply seemed to be the same idiotic one. Then, both of them fell silent again. Yes. Look at it now, the sun is shining brightly. There will be a moon in a while. June Moxie raised his head and pointed at the sky. He suddenly realized that it was almost dusk. Although the sky was not completely dark, the sun that should have been very big had already disappeared. I feel warm under the moonlight. Meow Xiao Meow felt warm all over her body. She didn't look up and just answered casually with her head down. It seemed like she didn't know what she was talking about. The last spectator, Little Beansprout, couldn't help but laugh. It was already dusk. Would the sun still be bright? It seemed that there was no sun at this hour, and there was no moon either. Also, could the moon shine? He could even bask in the sun and feel warm all over? My miss is really talented as young Master Mo. They are really a match made in heaven. Her sudden laugh instantly broke the silence. Meow Xiao Meow finally realized what she had just said, and she couldn't help but feel her entire body heat up. With a muffled cry, she covered her face and turned around to run away. Little Beansprout teasingly called out, "Miss, you're going in the wrong direction. The door is this way. You seem to be going to young Master Mo's room. Are you going there?" Meow Xiao Meow suddenly stopped. She didn't know whether to advance or retreat. She was at a loss and almost cried out of embarrassment. "What are you yelling about?" June Moxie rolled his eyes. "Is my room something that can't be seen by others? It's not like it's a secret. Besides, the song of the Burial of Flowers score is in my room. Miss Meow is going there to get it. You're going to the right place." Little Beansprout mischievously stuck out her tongue and made a face. She held back her laughter and said, "I said it wrong. You're going in the right direction. Aren't you going to young Master Mo's room? I was talking nonsense." June Dushao politely walked to the door of his room and said, "Miss Meow is really fond of music? I knew you were going to get the score. I was just about to tidy it up. Miss Meow, if you don't mind my humble abode, how about coming in and have a seat?" With such a buffer and June Moxie's invitation, Meow Xiao Meow's embarrassment was slightly alleviated. She lightly nodded and said, "Sorry to trouble young Master Mo. I'm sorry to disturb you." She then took small steps and followed June Moxie into the room. However, she didn't dare to raise her head. Her eyes could only see June Moxie's two moving feet. Little Beansprout naturally followed in. June Moxie was leading the way in front when he heard Little Beansprout scream and beg for mercy. "Miss, please spare me. I won't dare to do it again. At most, I won't follow you in. You can do whatever you want, no one will see you. Spare me?" He turned his head and saw Little Beansprout giggling and running away. However, she was caught by the embarrassed Meow Xiao Meow and was tickled. She couldn't stop begging for mercy, but the way she begged seemed more like she was teasing Meow Xiao Meow. "The relationship between you two is really good," June Moxie said sincerely. Normally, although the young misses of large families could be very intimate with their personal servants, there would still be a barrier of status between them. Their personal servants would never dare to be too unbridled. It was truly rare to see someone like Meow Xiao Meow and Little Beansprout, who were as close as sisters. Especially in one of the top aristocratic families in the misty illusory manner, having a master like Meow Xiao Meow was truly extremely rare. June Moxie could see that Meow Xiao Meow wasn't putting on an act, and Little Beansprout didn't mean to respond. Between the two of them, only a deep friendship could allow them to joke around so unscrupulously. June Moxie didn't doubt that although Little Beansprout would joke around with Meow Xiao Meow, she would definitely help Meow Xiao Meow at all costs if she was in danger. "June? I'm sorry. Although Little Beansprout is my servant in name, I've always treated her as a little sister. There are no secrets between us." Hearing June Moxie's sigh, Meow Xiao Meow smiled. Her eyes were filled with unconcealable pity. Her background? In short, I treasure her very much. When talking about little Beansprout, Meow Xiao Meow's expression became much more at ease. However, when it came to little Beansprout's background, she hesitated. This wasn't because she wanted to keep little Beansprout's secret, but because she was really thinking about little Beansprout. She didn't want to open the scar in her heart and make her feel pain again. Young miss? Little Beansprout looked at Meow Xiao Meow with red eyes. She choked with sobs. Being able to meet young miss is little Beansprout's lifetime blessing. You silly girl, young miss can't ask you to accompany her for a lifetime. In the future, you will naturally have a lover who will accompany you for the rest of your life. That is your true lifetime blessing? Meow Xiao Meow said pitifully. I only hope that no matter what happens, you won't forget this sister of yours. Little Beansprout will follow young miss for the rest of my life. I won't ever be separated from young Mississippi. I don't need any lover. Little Beansprout burst into tears. Meow Xiao Meow's eyes also turned red. Jun Emocia rubbed his nose when he saw that the atmosphere had turned sorrowful because of his words. He felt very surprised. Women are really strange. I was just being polite, but they're both crying. They're really emotional creatures. Without a choice, in order to break this sorrowful atmosphere, Jun Moxie could only tease, "Oh? Never be separated from your young miss? Little Beansprout, won't you become that Tong Fong girl?" Little Beansprout's tender face instantly turned red. Her intelligent big eyes blinked, not knowing what to do. After being stunned for a while, she covered her face and turned around. Her little feet stomped on the ground with all her might. She said bashfully, "Aya? Young Master Mo, you're really bad, bad." Looking at Meow Xiao Meow again, her face also turned red. It was believed that no matter who said this, with little Beansprout's sharp tongue, she would definitely retaliate immediately. However, when it was Jun Moxie who said this, little Beansprout immediately gave up, leaving only shyness, because this Mo Jun Yi in front of her was young Mrs. Sweetheart. If she really became young Mrs. Tong Fong girl, then she would also have to become his Tong Fong girl. How could this person speak like that? What was that? Seeing little Beansprout's embarrassment, Meow Xiao Meow couldn't help but say angrily, "Things haven't even started yet, and you're already thinking of becoming a Tong Fong girl. Young Master Mo, your ambition isn't small." Young Miss Meow's original intention was to smooth things over for little Beansprout. However, after she finished speaking, she realized that she seemed to have made a slip of the tongue. What she said was true, but the time and place were very wrong. With what she said, didn't that mean that she was Mo Junya's wife? Halfway through her words, she couldn't continue. Her face turned red, and her neck drooped down. Actually, Jun Emocia was also regretting his words. Although his intentions were good, it was too inappropriate for the time and place. Strictly speaking, it was the behavior of a lowly lecher. He was already prepared to be looked down upon, but he never expected that young Miss Meow would actually say something like that. He was momentarily stunned, and was speechless for a long time. After a long time, he finally said, "It seems like you two sisters have a deep relationship." He didn't finish his sentence, but the aftertaste was still lingering, because at this moment, he couldn't help but think that the deep relationship between Meow Xiao Meow and her servant was naturally a good thing. It could even be said that it was a bright spot in Meow Xiao Meow's character. Nowadays, which young lady from a noble family would really treat their own servant and servant as their own sisters? But from another perspective, which was the fact that she was determined to marry him, it was a huge disaster. This was the biggest factor that caused the harem to be unstable. At home, Du Xiaoyi, Guan Qinghan, and Mei Shuyan, which one of them was easy to provoke? If Meow Xiao Meow really followed him, then based on the sisterly relationship between her and little Beansprout, adding another Tong Fong girl would be impossible. At that time, the two sisters would definitely be on the same side. Chapter 996. Since there's a harem, there's no such thing as absolute fairness. Jun Moxie inadvertently brought up this topic, but it made him extremely vigilant in his heart. Jun Moxie laughed dryly, "I was only joking just now. Miss Meow, I've already prepared the music score you wanted. I just don't know if you'd like to copy the lyrics as well? Meow Xiao Meow was startled, but she still hadn't recovered from the shyness and sweetness in her heart. Suddenly hearing June Moxie's words, she only felt that there was something wrong with this sentence, but she couldn't pinpoint it, of course. Meow Xiao Meow said subconsciously, perplexed. Then I'll immediately start copying it for you. Hee hee, it's nothing much, it's really not worth mentioning. June Moxie laughed heartily. This song of the burial of flowers, if it falls into your hands, it'll definitely shine brilliantly. It'll bring out the best in each other, and this little brother can be considered to have fulfilled one of his wishes. As he said that, he raised the brush in his hand, and the brush moved like a dragon and a snake. With a wave, ink dripped down. The three of them chatted for a while, and Meow Xiao Meow stood up to bid farewell. She took the music score and left with Little Bean Sprout. But in her heart, she still felt that something was wrong, but she couldn't tell what exactly was wrong. Meow Xiao Meow only felt that today's Mo Junyi seemed to be a lot more unfamiliar than last night. There was even a faint, indescribable feeling of alienation rising in her heart. Although it was only a vague feeling, that feeling was abnormally clear. Meow Xiao Meow would rather that her feeling was wrong. But I've already disregarded the shyness of a girl and personally came here, but he still has this kind of attitude? Why does he treat me like this? Last night, although Meow Xiao Meow's actions were somewhat forceful, and even had a hint of cutting off all means of retreat, but at that time, she could clearly feel that Mo Junye's heart was shaken. It wasn't that he didn't want to accept her at all. He had also been tempted. That sweet feeling accompanied Meow Xiao Meow the whole night. That was why she had once again let go of her womanly demeanor and was so impatient. But now, she felt that what she was feeling right now was completely different from her expectations. Could it be that she was actually disappointed and in despair? Why did Mo Junyi suddenly become so unfamiliar after a night of life and death with him? No, that's not it. In the beginning, he had used himself as a reason to get out of his predicament. At that time, he could clearly feel that Mo Junyi didn't treat him as an outsider. Instead, he treated him as a relative. At that moment, Meow Xiao Meow clearly felt the satisfaction in her heart. A woman's intuition was never wrong, but it was also a woman's intuition. The faint sense of alienation in front of her had started from the joke of Tong Fong Girl. Ever since that joke, Mo Junyi had obviously become unfamiliar with it. But could it be that it was all because of a joke? Although it was the truth of the future, there shouldn't be such a huge change. That was just a joke. Meow Xiao Meow's woman's intuition was indeed not wrong. But the truth was slightly different from what she had imagined. Actually, even June Moxie himself didn't understand why he would think that way. As a youth who had received socialist education, although he didn't receive orthodox education, but monogamy at that time was already deeply ingrained in his bones. A person could perhaps like two different people, but he had to bear the pain of breaking up and the severing of the past before he could enjoy the new relationship, but June Moxie had forgotten. It had already been a long time since he had transmigrated to this world. In this world, the strong were supreme. Men were superior to women. Moreover, due to the constant wars and killings throughout the years, it caused the number of men to shrink. The ratio of men to women was simply unbalanced. So, this resulted in the formation of this polygamy society, and the most important point, polygamy and enjoying the blessings of love, was originally the dream of all men. On this point, no matter what society or country, men were the same, regardless of whether they were successful or not. Naturally, June Moxie was no exception. Now that he'd arrived at this age where polygamy was legal and reasonable, he was able to satisfy a man's greatest vanity. So June Moxie did not need any time to get used to it, and he had already accepted this reality. This was the embodiment of happiness for all men, or this was originally the common weakness of all men. So, it also became June Dashao's weakness. On this point, it seemed that no matter if one was a gentleman or a villain, a saint or a hero, as long as one was a man, their feelings were the same, and their hearts were the same. The key was whether this man could restrain himself, that was all. Those who could restrain themselves were the so-called good men. As for those who couldn't, they were But now, in such a big environment, Jun Moxie didn't seem to be a good man. Or it should be said that he had never thought of restraining himself. So, his thinking in this aspect was the same as all the ancient people, the unity of the harem. This, however, was the most important thing for a man to consider in this era, and in such a background, family harmony, everything would prosper, but in ancient times or in feudal societies with similar social systems, it was the unity of the harem, everything would prosper. This had nothing to do with morality, but Jun Moxie's rascal words were, "Damn it, there are so few men here, there are so few teapots and so many teacups. What can I do? Let nature take its course." Anyway, you can't blame me. Although she got the precious music score of Song of the Burial of Flowers, Miao Xiao Miao's mind was not on it at all. She had been confused in her heart. Why did he suddenly become so cold today? Didn't I express myself clearly yesterday? What did he mean? Is he rejecting me? With such a depressed mood, Miao Xiao Miao returned home listlessly. Her mood had really fallen to the extreme. She didn't even want to speak. How could the attentive mother not be worried when she saw her baby daughter go out in high spirits but come back gloomily with a heavy heart? So, she secretly called Little Beansprout aside and carefully interrogated her. But Little Beansprout seemed to be even more ignorant of the situation, so naturally, she couldn't explain it clearly. Helpless, Mother Miao could only go to her daughter's room and personally persuade her unhappy daughter. After several twists and turns and countless words, Miao Xiao Miao shyly told her the reason. She was in a state of confusion and wanted to find someone to talk to and solve her doubts, and her mother was undoubtedly the best candidate. However, Miao Xiao Miao didn't get to the main point at first, but because of Mother Miao's love for her daughter, she kept asking about every detail, and finally, she got the gist of the whole story from the shy baby's mouth, combining the cause and effect. Mother Miao finally smiled bitterly and sighed. "My daughter is really too innocent. Although she can be considered smart and quick-witted, when it comes to this kind of thing, she is still ignorant. Mother, tell me, why is he doing this? He treated me so coldly, does that mean he's rejecting me?" Miao Xiao Miao blushed. She really had no other choice, otherwise, she wouldn't have asked directly like this. Sigh. "My poor daughter." Mother Miao didn't know what to say for a while. Even though she was a talented woman in the past, she still felt that her daughter's situation was a little difficult to talk about. After thinking for a long time, she tactfully said, "Xiao Miao, you once said that when you revealed your feelings to Mo Junyi last night, he was moved, but he never promised you anything, right?" "Yes, but I'm sure he was moved, otherwise I wouldn't have left," Miao Xiao Miao said pitifully. "That's right. Xiao Miao, listen to your mother and give up. You won't be happy with this man." Mother Miao sighed and tried to persuade her. "But, Mother, why would you say that? Why wouldn't such a good man be happy?" Miao Xiao Miao raised her head in shock. "Mother, could it be that you really have the heart to see me become a tool for the family to unite through marriage?" Mother Miao sighed deeply and said, "Nothing is absolute. Even if you become a tool for the family to unite through marriage, it doesn't necessarily mean that you won't be happy. Just like me and your father, isn't that the case? Aren't we happy now?" Miao Xiao Miao cried out in horror. "Mother, I'm different from you in the past. At that time, you didn't know anything. But Mother, even if you didn't know anything, didn't you have a girl's dream in your heart back then? May your daughter be so bold as to ask, how much of the father now is the same as the one in your dream?" Mother Miao's delicate body trembled slightly, but her expression was calm as she said, "Who hasn't had a dream? But my dream is an illusion. But my dream now is reality. In reality, there is such an outstanding man. He is my dream. I can't pretend that I didn't see him. Especially after we went through life and death together, and he was the one who lifted my veil. In fact, I've almost obtained him." Miao Xiao Miao cried out emotionally. "If Mother and the family want me to marry someone else, I'd rather die." Madame Miao felt a sense of helplessness as she watched her daughter speak resolutely despite her tears welling up in her eyes. Chapter 997. Madame Meow said earnestly. Your beauty is enough to cause the downfall of a city and country. I believe that even if all the peerless beauties from ancient times were to stand together, my daughter would definitely be able to rank in the top 10. Furthermore, your family background is renowned throughout the world, and few can compare to you. Even the royal princesses of the secular world are worlds apart from you in terms of value. Her temperament is also gentle and refined, and her talent and martial arts skills are even rare in 1,000 years. But not only did this man not feel overwhelmed by her favor, he even chose to reject her. What could be the reason behind this? Hearing these words, Miao Xiaomiao could not help but fall into deep thought. Her mother's words might be a little exaggerated, but they could also be considered as the truth. Since she had so many advantages, why would Mo Junyi still reject her? This was also the reason she could not understand. Mother, what exactly is the reason? Miao Xiaomiao thought for a long time, but still could not figure it out. She could not help but ask worriedly, Mother, what exactly is the reason? AI, as expected, those closely involved can't see clearly. The reason is extremely simple. It is because of what you said today. After that joke, his attitude immediately turned cold. Madame Miao sighed deeply. What is going on? How could it be the same reason? Miao Xiaomiao began to panic. This person with the free and natural physique has someone else in his heart. Madame Miao sighed and said, From what you have said, this Mo Junye's words are full of poems, and every sentence is thought-provoking. Furthermore, they are filled with sincere emotions that are as deep as the sea. Yet, in every sentence, there is a feeling of unbearable past. If these poems were all composed by him, and the song of the burial of flowers that you obtained today, Madame Miao pointed at the music score in Miao Xiaomiao's hands. The song, I'm afraid it might not have been composed by a woman from a few hundred years ago. If it was, how could we not have heard it? You have to know, this mother has been immersed in the path of music for many years, and I am confident that I am not inferior to anyone in this world. Yet I have truly never heard of such a wonderful song, and your father, just for this little hobby of mine, how many people did he send out? Some time ago, the song The Smiling, Proud, Wanderer appeared in Chrysanthemum City. In less than 3 days I, your mother, have the complete score. If it is really an ancient score, there is no reason for your mother not to know. Also, although this song is excellent, the mood of the song is even more profound. Aside from self-pity, it is also filled with the sorrow of parting. Madame Miao sighed. I can even conclude that this is not the end of the song. This mother can even conclude that this song should have been composed by young master Mo Junyi himself, and was used to reminisce. That is why it has never been circulated. You have to know, if a woman had really reached such a stage where death was inevitable, she would definitely not compose such a song. In this song, although there is no mention of love between a man and a woman, every word and sentence is filled with the sorrow of love between a man and a woman, as well as the loss of life and death. If a woman has a lover by her side, even if she died, she would still be happy. Why would she leave behind such a song to make her lover grieve day and night? You and I are both women. Could it be that we still can't understand the hearts of women? Miao Xiaomiao seemed to have understood something, and said, Mother's words are indeed reasonable. Could it be that this was all done by himself after his lover left? This point should be without a doubt. Madame Miao nodded. Actually, he had already hinted to you long ago. I remember you said in the morning that he had said something to that musical genius yesterday. Those who have seen the ocean cannot see the water, those who have not seen Mount Wu cannot see the clouds. Unfortunately, you are still stuck in the situation, unable to wake up from it. Madame Miao let out a long sigh and said, Daughter, I'll say it again, let go. If it was a living person with my daughter, you definitely have all the conditions to win. However, facing a dead person, even if you are a fairy from the 9th heaven, you cannot replace him. Even if you can barely replace him, you will only be a substitute. If that is really the case, are you willing to accept it? So he has experienced such pain. He is truly a sentimental person. If such a good man were to be missed, how would I ever find him again? Meow Xiao Meow's eyes were exceptionally mournful, and her voice was filled with heartache. To think that my husband would actually have such pain in his heart, Madame Meow immediately sighed helplessly. Daughter, it is not that mother wants to say these discouraging words on purpose, but you must know, whether it is a man or a woman, there is a dream in everyone's heart. Even if it is a woman who has not experienced anything, there will still be a dream in her heart, a shadow that will never be clear, no matter how sinister and ruthless that man becomes in the future, or even heinous, or licentious and lowly. But the first woman to enter this man's heart will always be the goddess in his heart. Madame Meow said word by word, of the women who came after, no one can truly replace them. Even if the woman who came after is 10,000 times stronger than the first, or even more, in this man's heart, the most precious will always be the first woman. She was the first woman he liked when he was young and ignorant, not the first woman he got. If it were a woman, the logic would be the same. No matter how this woman becomes in the future, licentious and lowly, willing to marry anyone, even living in a brothel, a pair of jade arms pillowed by 1,000 men, a bit of red lips tasted by 10,000 men. But in her heart, until the day she dies, she will always remember the man she first liked. In front of that man, no matter how many years she wandered around, she is still that shy and pure young girl. Madame Meow's voice was heavy. Xiao Meow, do you understand what I'm saying? Men and women are actually the same. The initial innocence and true love is something that will not be forgotten even in death. Your current situation is exactly like that, and that Mo Junyi is obviously someone else, the kind of person who already has a preconceived impression of someone else in his heart. Madame Meow sighed. Do you know why he still hesitated in the face of your temptation, and still rejected it? Because he is afraid. He is afraid that you will affect the position of that person in his heart. He does not dare to try, does not dare to take the risk. Meow Xiao Meow propped her cheeks up with her hands and muttered, but, Mother, since he has such a memory in his heart, and bitterly longing for it day and night, wouldn't his heart be filled with bitterness? If there is no one to help him, then what should he do? He is the possessor of the free and natural physique, and is destined to have a long lifespan. Is he going to suffer for the rest of his life? That is so heart-wrenching. How can I sit by and watch? I must save him, I must. Madame Meow was flabbergasted and speechless. She had painstakingly said so many words with the goal of hoping that her daughter would give up. But who would have thought that her words would actually have the opposite effect? This was really unexpected. Meow Xiao Meow's worries were indeed, it looked like this lass was really beyond saving. She might have understood the logic, but she had already fallen into the trap of love and had completely fallen. But do you know why he suddenly became so cold today? It's not because of anything else. It's because the sisterhood between you and Little Beansprout is too deep, and it's too easy for the two of you to become one. The moment you enter his life, Little Beansprout will also enter his life. This will be a huge threat to the position in his heart, and it might even be a challenge. Do you understand? Do you understand? Madame Meow still wanted to make one last effort. Furthermore, as long as his first impression is the strongest, in the future, as long as you and Little Beansprout are together, he will become suspicious. As long as you and Little Beansprout come to an agreement on a certain matter, he will be disgusted. What kind of happiness is there to be said for following such a person? Daughter, let go. Don't regret it when it's too late in the future. Could it be that in this misty mansion, there are a total of 8 great families, hundreds of small and medium families, and so many talented youths, but not a single one of them can compare to Mo Junyi? Madame Meow asked helplessly. Let's not talk about whether there is anyone who can compare to him. June Moxie, he's really too pitiful. Meow Xiao Meow had already imagined the perfect tragic story of a man in her heart for June Moxie. Her beautiful eyes were filled with sorrow as she said, this kind of man can calmly face my beauty and talent, completely disregard our Meow family's power, and still choose to reject me. Mother, this kind of person clearly sees riches and honor as fleeting clouds, and sees fame as dirt. This kind of person is the one who truly values relationships the most, and is the true extraordinary man in this world. Haven't you always taught me this way? Don't tell me you've changed your mind at the last minute. Don't tell me that you want me to abandon such an extraordinary man and marry an unknown, lustful, and worthless disciple of an aristocratic family? Is it just for the dazzling halo of an aristocratic family's descendant and the huge help it can bring to the family? In my eyes, those numerous disciples of the aristocratic families are just a bunch of people who are fighting for fame and profit. You just asked me if there was really no one who could compare to Mo Junyi. Let me tell you solemnly, there really is no one who can compare to him. Compared to Junyi, those signs can't even compare to a single toe of his. Miao Xiaomiao smiled proudly. She opened her arms as if she was announcing to the world. Because in this world, only he is called Mo Junyi. The others weren't. I only want him. Mother, don't you think this name is very cool? Mo Junyi. The night is as dark as ink, but it's filled with the air of a gentleman, just like him last night. Miao Xiaomiao smiled dreamily. Madame Miao sighed sadly, truly speechless. She really couldn't understand. With her gentle and submissive personality, how could she have given birth to such a stubborn daughter? She was actually stubborn about everything. Chapter 998. Mother, it's precisely because Junyi has no regrets about his past love that I like him even more. Miao Xiaomiao's beautiful eyes shone with a fervent light. It's precisely because I like him that I want to stay by his side. I don't mind being a substitute. As long as I can heal the scars in his heart, so what if I'm a substitute? I don't want him to continue frowning and forcing himself to smile like this. That way, even if I'm not by his side, my heart will still ache. Madame Miao looked at her daughter in a daze. Her heart was in a mess. If she had had her daughter's persistence in the past, what was the point of saying all this now? Her life now was very blissful. Her husband was considerate and gentle, and her daughter was intelligent and obedient. As a woman, what else could she not be satisfied with in this life, even if I have to suffer and suffer with him? I will gladly endure it. Miao Xiaomiao propped up her chin and looked at the bright moon that had already risen into the sky. She mumbled as if she was in a dream. As long as I can be with him, I will be satisfied. Miao Xiaomiao's voice was very resolute. And she seemed to have made up her mind. Junyi, the scars in your heart, let me use my entire life, my tenderness, to help you heal them, to help you recover. Madame Miao's body swayed. As she looked at her daughter's eyes that were filled with dreams and longing, she suddenly felt weak all over. Although her daughter was right in front of her, she felt so far away. Mo Junyi took away my daughter's heart, just like that. Just what kind of free and natural physique are you? Mother, you also said that no matter if it's a man or a woman, they will never be able to forget the first person they fell in love with, and Junyi was the first person who barged into my heart. Miao Xiaomiao smiled shyly. Mother, I really can't forget him. I'm afraid that I will never be able to forget him in this lifetime. The moment I took off my veil in front of him, I suddenly felt that in this life, I suddenly had someone to rely on, a strong and solid support. Mother, that feeling is very blissful. Miao Xiaomiao raised her head and looked at her mother with sparkling eyes. Although Junyi's looks aren't all that handsome, but in my eyes, he's 10,000 times better than those handsome and suave young masters from the aristocratic families. 1,000,000 times. There's no comparison at all. Madame Miao was completely speechless. She sighed softly and walked out. Suddenly, she realized something. She stopped in front of the door and asked, "You just said you actually took off your veil last night?" "He didn't?" Miao Xiaomiao was stunned and her face turned red. She knew that her mother had heard something from her words just now, so she immediately acted coquettishly and shamelessly said, "Mother, it doesn't matter if it's me or him. He is the only man in this world who has seen my true face since I became an adult, and the veil in my heart has long been opened for him. This, How is it any different from him personally taking off my veil? Madame Miao stood there in a daze for a while. She really didn't know what to say. The person who took off the veil, the difference between taking the initiative and being passive was too great. But Madame Miao hesitated again and finally sighed. She didn't say anything else and quietly left. She only felt that the sighs she had sighed today were more than the sighs she had ever sighed in her entire life. June, my daughter has such deep feelings for you. I hope you won't let her down. Madame Miao looked at the bright moon and sincerely made her only wish for the rest of her life. Jun Dashao had never thought that because of his rejection and that moment of abnormality, so many touching stories had been born about him. Furthermore, the name that he randomly came up with was actually filled with the air of a gentleman, so poetic and picturesque. One had to say that the imagination of women was truly too rich. Although it couldn't be said that Mother Miao's judgment was completely wrong, in fact, most of what she said was correct, including how Jun Dashao rejected Miao Xiao Miao because of another woman. She even guessed the origin of the Song of the Burial of Flowers. But when all of these things were added together, there seemed to be a huge difference from the original. To say that it was the difference between heaven and earth, or perhaps it was the complete opposite. After sending off Miao Xiao Miao, Jun Dashao prepared to go to bed. Dashao was also a human, and as long as one was a human, they would get tired. From the looks of it, it had been a long time since Dashao had a good rest. After all, in the following days, whether it was dealing with the Zhan family, Chao Guofeng and the rest, or celebrating Miao Jingyun's birthday, or entering the spiritual herbal gardens, all of these were things that would greatly exhaust his mental energy. Now that he could rest early and sleep, he could also use this excuse to avoid the interrogation of Holy Emperor Chao and the rest. Killing two birds with one stone, why not? So young Master Jun blew out the oil lamp, and with a whoosh he took off all his clothes, and crawled into bed with his naked body. Originally, Jun Moxie did not have the habit of sleeping naked. As an assassin, and an outstanding assassin, he naturally had to be prepared for any situation. As long as one was human, they would always have a sense of shame. Fighting with bare buttocks was only suitable between a man and a woman. If it was against a man holding a sword and fighting with bare buttocks, the pressure would definitely be huge and it would definitely be a huge test, but ever since Dashao obtained the Yin-Yang escape art, and especially since he could enter the Hongjun Pagoda at any time, Jun Dashao gradually changed his habits. He had placed a lot of clothes in the Hongjun Pagoda. From the inside to the outside, he was prepared to enter at any time, and he would definitely go in naked and come out fully clothed, and it would also have the effect of a sneak attack. This kind of thing was really too satisfying. So, Jun Dashao gradually fell in love with sleeping naked. This kind of sleeping method that could relax one's muscles and nerves, tonight was naturally no exception. However, there were no absolutes in this world, and everything might not go as one wished. For example, tonight, Jun Dashao met with an accident. In the dead of the night, the moon hung high in the sky, illuminating tens of thousands of li. The moon was bright and the wind was clear. This was not a good time for a night walker to move. However, there were always exceptions to everything. Again, there were no absolutes in this world. From a certain direction at the foot of the mountain, a strange black shadow was flying up at high speed. This person's speed was extremely fast, but there was no sound of clothes fluttering in the wind. That person's face was covered with a black cloth, and even his entire head was covered. Only a pair of unusually calm eyes could be seen. But the calmness in this pair of eyes was not the kind of calmness that came from someone who had seen through the world. It was a kind of indifferent calmness that looked at the lives of all living beings in the world as if they were nothing. It was as if no one's life or death, in his heart, was worth mentioning. His speed was really very fast. It was as if a black cloud had only appeared in the distance. In the next moment, his figure had already arrived in front of the small courtyard where Holy Emperor Chao and the rest were staying. This person's cultivation was definitely higher than Chao Guofeng and the rest. And it was much higher, because until he arrived in front of the courtyard, the 4 holy emperors who were on night duty in the courtyard actually did not notice him. One must know that even if a holy emperor of the same level came, they would be able to notice him from 300 feet away. But now that this person was already very close to them, they still did not notice him. In the next moment, this black-clothed person did not hesitate at all, and directly soared into the sky. Like a big black bird, he suddenly folded his wings and shot straight up into the sky like a sharp arrow. His speed was so fast. However, the entire process was still silent and undetectable. In midair, there was no need to make any changes at all. His whole body abruptly shot straight down. Only when he was about to touch the roof, did he let out a strong whistling sound that could shake the heaven and earth. All the Xian Qi in his body had already been completely integrated into this attack. The air between the heaven and earth seemed to have frozen in that instant. At this moment, it was as if even the slanting rays of the moon had been misaligned. Space imprisonment. Furthermore, the area covered by this space shackle was the entire courtyard. Such a large area of imprisonment, even if it was the third-level Holy Emperor, Chao Guofeng, who was at the peak of the Holy Emperor realm, he would definitely not be able to do it. Once an expert made a move, it would be clear whether he was skilled or not. The strength of this black-clothed person had actually reached such a level. The target of this attack was the row of buildings in the center of Chao Guofeng's courtyard. No matter who looked, this was the place with the tightest security in the entire courtyard. That person with the free and natural physique was definitely staying here. This attack might not be enough to destroy the Holy Emperor. But injuring the Holy Emperor was still not a problem, especially when he was completely defenseless. But the main target of this attack was still that person with the free and natural physique. This attack, other than having the strength to injure the Holy Emperor, was also an attack that did not discriminate between people. As long as that person with the free and natural physique was still in this row of buildings, he would definitely die. Even if it was just a slight graze, there was no way he would survive. That expert who did not hesitate to use such a ruthless method to bully the weak and plot against Jun Dashao and the 7 holy emperors was the Saint Venerable expert of the Zhan family, earth-penetrating hand, Zhan Xiaoxiao. Zhan Lunhui was really going all out this time, sending out one of the top experts in the world. Now that the Zhan family had suddenly fallen into chaos, Zhan Lunhui had never thought of getting rid of the free and natural physique Mo Dashao first. Even if Mo Junyi had the free and natural physique and had shocking potential, it would still be difficult for him to climb up to the ranks of the top experts for a period of time. As long as he did not have enough strength, he was still not a threat to the Zhan family. But the deaths of Zhan Qingfeng and Zhan Yushu had reminded this old ancestor of the Zhan family of an important question. The Zhan family that had always had everything going smoothly, how did it end up in such a state today? Why was it that the Zhan family's conspiracy that had been going on for over 1,000 years was only foiled today? Was this really fate and luck? Perhaps it was, or perhaps it wasn't. Because the cause of all this was a variable. Chapter 999. It was because the Zhan family had instructed Zhan Qingfeng and Zhan Yushu to plot against Mo Junyi, hoping to gain complete control over him. But in the end, they went for wool and came home shorn. It was also because they were indignant about their loss that Zhan Qingfeng and Zhan Yushu ordered their subordinates to assassinate Mo Junyi. Everything started from that time. If one had to talk about luck, then the one who changed the Zhan family's smooth sailing was Mo Junyi, this star of calamity. So this star of calamity must be eliminated. Especially during this period of time, Zhan Lunhui had finally obtained the information he wanted the most. At the moment when the 6 Zhan family guards were about to kill Mo Junyi and Miao Xiao Miao, a peerless expert suddenly appeared and used a divine technique that only a Saint Venerable could use, the Imperial Sword technique to kill all 8 of them, saving Mo Junyi and Miao Xiao Miao. This matter was not a big deal in the first place. But the real problem was, in just one day, the Zhan family's grand plan that they had laid out for thousands of years, at the final moment when it was about to be completed, suffered a cruel blow. It caused the entire plan to fail completely. Thousands of years, tens of generations of hard work, countless manpower, and powerlessness were all destroyed in a single day. It was also an expert with unfathomable strength who had barged into the underground world. First, he killed Jean Tianji and ruined the grand plan of reversing the flow of fortune and ruined the Jean family's thousand-year grand plan. After that, he killed two of the Jean family's juniors, Jean Qingfeng and Jean Yushu. No matter how Jean Qingfeng and Jean Yushu died, Jean Luanhui did not believe that the two of them were really scared to death. There was no other reason. The two of them died right after that mysterious expert had arrived. Summing up all the strange things that happened in these 2 days, this mysterious expert who came to the Jean family to cause trouble and that mysterious expert who had saved Mo Junyi and Miao Xiao Miao slowly overlapped in Jean Luanhui's heart. This was basically enough to confirm that it was the same person. Because the Jean family wanted to deal with Mo Junyi, he came for revenge. The reason why Jean Qingfeng and his brother died was because they were the main culprits behind the assassination of Mo Junyi. Jean Luanhui's conclusion was that all of this was because of the free and natural physique of Mo Junyi. This mysterious expert thought very highly of Mo Junyi. Therefore, as long as they killed Mo Junyi, this person would appear again. So when Jean Luanhui received the news of Jean Qingfeng and Jean Yushu's deaths, he immediately gave the order to kill that free and natural physique Mo Junyi. Jean Xiao, who had already accepted this mission, was naturally unwilling to pass on this responsibility. He took the lead and immediately took action. To Jean Xiao, bullying the weak was not the main point. Lowering his own status was also not the main point. The process was not important. Only the result was meaningful. Only fulfilling Jean Luanhui's instructions was the main point. Now, it could be said that it was a matter of life and death. Jun Mo Xie suddenly felt a strong sense of danger in his dreams. And it was a life-threatening danger. Before he could even open his eyes, he had already entered the world of the Hongjun Pagoda. At the same time, a shrill cry rang through the heavens and earth. Enemy attack! Everyone be careful! The person is an expert. As the voice rang out, 4 exceptionally brilliant sword lights shot out from 4 different directions. Although the direction was different, their target was the same. Those 4 sword lights were like 4 pillars of light that connected heaven and earth, shooting towards the black-robed man Jean Xiao in midair. With a loud boom, it was as if the air in the world was trembling. In the courtyard that Chao Guofeng lived in, a row of 30 to 40 houses collapsed at the same time. Dust and smoke rose into the air. Countless broken tiles and broken wood flew everywhere, and a huge mushroom cloud rose into the sky. The impact was so great that it was even more powerful than an atomic bomb exploding here. The entire courtyard, which had 3 entrances and a small garden outside, was completely destroyed by this one attack. The power of a Saint Venerable's strike was actually this powerful. Amidst the dust and smoke, a few more angry roars rang out. Another 3 even brighter sword lights pierced through the air, and Chao Guofeng and the rest shot out. Together with the 4 sword lights that had already reached their peak, the 7 holy emperors attacked at the same time. Their target was the black-robed man in midair. The 7 holy emperors attacked together, swearing to kill this person. Right now, the rage in the hearts of these 7 people could be said to have reached an extreme. Especially Chao Guofeng, Bai Qifeng, and the other 2 who were resting in their rooms. If not for the fact that they had been extremely vigilant these few days and had been meditating every night instead of sleeping, they would have most likely lost their lives to this sudden fatal attack. With this irrefutable understanding in their hearts, these 7 people were all enraged. Just what kind of deep hatred did they have for each other to be so vicious? This was especially so for Chao Guofeng. Amidst the lingering fear in his heart, he felt a tinge of relief. Thank God Junyi had strongly requested to stay in the row of rooms by the wall. Otherwise, if he had stayed in the original row, with his weak cultivation, how could he still be alive? Seeing the 7 swords flying towards him with the force of wind and lightning, the black-robed man did not seem to be bothered at all. With a cold laugh, he suddenly spun in midair, and 7 black palms the size of millstones appeared clearly in midair. It was a head-on clash without any tricks. Peng peng, A series of sounds of clashing rang out. As the two sides clashed, the black-robed man somersaulted even higher into the air, his clothes flapping loudly in the wind. And the 7 holy emperors all fell towards the ground at the same time. Even with the combined strength of the 7 of them, they were only on par with the enemy. This person is actually so strong. He is definitely a Saint Venerable expert. Even with the 7 of us working together, we might not have a chance of winning. As Chao Guofeng's body fell, his mind quickly made the most logical decision. Since we can't win, we can only defend with all our strength and wait for reinforcements. Then we can only defend with all our strength and wait for reinforcements. As long as there's a chance, we must bring Mo Junyi away immediately. The house he lives in is still within the range of our Xianqi battle. I'm afraid his life is in danger. This person's target must be Mo Junyi. Bai Qifeng also had the same thought. It seemed like it was not only Chao and Bai. In fact, the other 5 holy emperors all had the same thought. The 7 holy emperors looked at each other, each of them instantly understanding what the others were thinking. They were also mentally prepared for the strategy they were going to use to deal with the enemy. Right now, the courtyard is completely destroyed. None of the servants were able to escape. Only these 7 people still had a considerable amount of battle strength. But although the expressions of these 7 people were filled with wariness, there was no hint of sorrow or pain. From the looks of it, most of the people with the free and natural physique were not dead yet. Since he was not dead, it meant that he was not staying in the row of houses that had just been destroyed. Zhang Xiaoxiao had fought countless battles in his life, and his experience could be said to be plentiful. As he spun around in the air, this thought flashed through his mind. Suddenly, Zhang Xiaoxiao stretched out his hands and with a whoosh he shot down at high speed. An unstoppable gust of wind from his palms bombarded the remaining parts of the courtyard indiscriminately. Zhang Xiaoxiao's body had only descended less than 5 zhang with his extreme speed, but his palms had already struck out over 100 palms indiscriminately. Moreover, the attacks were far from stopping. They continued to attack at an increasingly faster speed. Bastard! The eyes of Chao Guofeng and the rest instantly turned red. The 7 of them gave up on their original strategy at the same time and rushed to the half-collapsed house, using all their strength to defend against the enemy's palms. So that brat is there? Zhang Xiaoxiao's eyes lit up. He spread his arms and pounced down. How sharp was the full power of a Saint Venerable's attack? Although Chao Guofeng and the rest had already used all their strength and were working together, they were still unable to withstand it and were forced to retreat. I can't wait any longer. If I allow them to continue being beaten like this, none of the 7 of them will be able to survive. Jun Moxie changed into a black robe from the Hongjun Pagoda and dashed out. No matter what, Da Xiao could not watch as Chao Guofeng and the rest lost their lives here to protect him. A black shadow flashed and instantly rushed into a small room that had become dilapidated. Then, it flew out from the back window with a bang. It seemed to be holding something in its arms. From the looks of it, it seemed to be a human body. Then with a schwa sound, it shot into the distance. Before it left behind an unusually old voice. I beg Holy Emperor Chao and the rest to block that person. This old man will bring that Mo brat away first. Chao Guofeng and the others immediately felt relieved. Although they didn't know who that person was, judging from his movement technique, he was undoubtedly a powerful expert. Moreover, he was clearly on their side. Since Mo Junyi was fine, the 7 of them could rest assured and focus all their strength to block Zhang Xiaoxiao. A Saint Venerable was undoubtedly powerful. If Chao Guofeng and the rest were to fight one-on-one, they would most likely lose their lives in a few moves. But there were 7 holy emperors here. With the 7 holy emperors working together to deal with Zhang Xiaoxiao, although there was still no hope of victory, it was definitely not a problem for them to protect themselves. And when that Zhang Xiaoxiao saw that the fat meat that was already in his mouth had been snatched away by a mysterious person, how could he let the matter rest? After receiving a blow from the 7 holy emperors, he let out a shrill howl and shot up into the sky like a bolt of lightning. He shot up to a height of 700 zhang. In the night sky, he had become a tiny black dot. He gave up on his battle with the 7 Saint Emperors and made an extremely smooth turn in the air, shooting off into the distance like a shooting star. His target was naturally a small black dot, a mysterious black shadow that could disappear at any moment. How could Chao Guofeng and the rest be willing to give up? They all activated their movement techniques and chased after him. But they did not dare to split up rashly. If they split up and that black-robed man suddenly turned around, it would be a complete tragedy. Chapter 1000. 2 black shadows, like meteors chasing after the moon, swept across the vast sky and earth like smoke. In the blink of an eye, they had entered the dense forest outside the mountain. By the time the rest of the pursuers arrived, they had already lost track of where the two had gone. Chao Guofeng and the rest could only look at the green forest before them. They couldn't help but sigh and spit out a mouthful of blood. In the previous battle, they had already suffered a blow that caught them off guard, causing them to suffer some internal injuries. Following that, they had to forcefully block the palm wind, adding more injuries on top of their own. After barely holding on until here, they could no longer suppress their internal injuries and exploded out. The might of a Saint Venerable was truly extraordinary. Among the group of pursuers, a green-robed old man stepped out and asked in a low voice, "What exactly happened?" The one who spoke was the Misty Mansion's manor lord, Miao Jingyun. Bai Chi Feng coughed and recounted the entire matter from start to end. Finally, he said, "It's all thanks to the manor lord's arrangements. If it was just the 7 of us brothers, I'm afraid tonight would have been a disaster." Miao Jingyun was taken aback and muttered, "But I didn't arrange for anyone to go." The moment these words came out, the faces of Chao Guofeng and the rest changed. The manor lord would definitely not lie, especially at a time like this. Then, who was that black-robed man? Chase in. No matter what, we must capture that black-robed man who came to attack. This old man would like to see who it is. Just which family has such guts to actually send a Saint Venerable expert to harm a child? Miao Jingyun ordered angrily. At the same time, his sharp eyes glanced at the Zhan family's patriarch, Zhan Wuyun, who had just arrived. The warning in his eyes caused Zhan Wuyun to tremble in fear. Although Miao Jingyun was taken aback by Chao Guofeng's words, he was also someone who had seen the ways of the world. With a single command, the tens of experts from the misty illusory manor that had come to reinforce entered the dense forest and began a carpet search. Among these people, the weakest had the strength of a level 4 saint. Most of them were experts of the Holy Emperor, and there were even a few Saint Venerables. After all, they had already confirmed from Chao Guofeng and the others that the attacker was a Saint Venerable. If there was no corresponding opponent, then it would not be a rescue mission, but a suicide mission. As Jun Moxie sped forward, the killing intent in his heart grew stronger. Although the killing intent in his heart was strong, Jun Moxie was not in a hurry to counterattack. After all, the person behind him was a Saint Venerable expert, and his strength was extremely shocking, far above his own. If he wanted to kill him, it would not be an easy matter, and a rash counterattack would not succeed. So, Jun Dashao had to wait patiently until he found a suitable place and time to make his move. Then, he would finish off this fellow who dared to come and slap a fly on the tiger's head. Speaking of the Saint Venerable expert behind him, Jun Dashao was sure that he had never seen this person before. Previously, when he was in the Zhan family, the 2 people who surrounded him were also Saint Venerables, but they did not look like this person. However, Jun Moxie was certain that this person was definitely someone from the Zhan family. Furthermore, he was someone with a very important position in the Zhan family. It had only been a day, and the Zhan family had already sent out such an important person to deal with him. From this, it could be seen that the Zhan family's hatred for him had reached a deep level, to the point that they could not wait any longer. You don't intend to let me have an easy time? Since everyone's standpoint is clear, it seems like destroying your secret base isn't enough for you? For the sake of letting me and the people around me have an easier time, I can only let your Zhan family experience another huge earthquake. I've understood the principle of fellow Taoists die rather than me since I was very young. The mountain ahead was tall and the forest was dense. Jun Moxie took the lead and charged straight in. Zhang Xiaoxiao had spent his entire life killing. How could he be afraid of a small forest in front of him? Furthermore, through his earlier observation, he had already confirmed that although the mysterious person who had taken away the free and natural physique was extremely strong, there was still a certain gap between them. Thus, he was even more fearless and naturally followed in. With a swoosh, the two of them, one in front and one behind, instantly disappeared from the forest with only a distance of over 20 zhang between them. It was currently the beginning of summer, and the grass in the forest had just fully grown. The moment a person entered the forest, they would be completely invisible. Not even their head could be seen. What's more, it was the middle of the night right now. Zhang Xiaoxiao's xianqi was high, and he could see things in the dark as if it was in the day. Coupled with his omnipresent powerful divine sense, he was confident that he could ignore this obstacle. But the moment he entered the forest, he instantly sensed that something was wrong. In the process of chasing earlier, he could clearly confirm that the strength of the mysterious person in front was not as strong as his. But his methods were extremely crafty. In terms of absolute speed, he was clearly inferior to him. But the way he fled was extremely crafty. Under normal circumstances, his cultivation was far superior. Even if he couldn't kill the person in front of him on the spot with a few air-splitting palms, he would at least be able to delay him for a moment. But this person was advancing in a snake-like manner. Sometimes in the east, sometimes in the west. Even with his powerful divine sense, he was still unable to completely lock onto his position. Especially every time he turned a corner, he would suddenly increase his speed for no reason. Before he turned a corner, he had already shortened the distance to a few dozen zhang. He only needed to put in a little more effort and he would be able to catch up. But after he turned a corner, Zhang Xiaoxiao would discover that the distance between them had increased by another 70 to 80 zhang. And this kind of phenomenon was happening consecutively. This was undoubtedly very strange. Now that both parties had entered the forest, this strange feeling was even more obvious. That mysterious person was not alone. He was still carrying that free and natural physique lad. How could he disappear without a trace in an instant? It was as if a drop of water had melted into the ocean, completely disappearing without a trace. How was this possible? The moment one entered such an extremely dense forest, to someone who was good at tracking, there should be traces everywhere. But this fellow in front of him actually did not even touch a single blade of grass. Then where did he escape from? Zhang Xiaoxiao had no idea. Without any other choice, he directly soared into the sky and looked around. Finally, he saw that about 100 zhang away, there was a patch of grass moving like a slight wave. Although it is a brilliant technique, it is still displaying one's slight skill in front of an expert. Don't even think of escaping from me today. Zhang Xiaoxiao's figure flashed and he chased in that direction. In the blink of an eye, he exited the forest from the other side and turned into another mountain range. Then, he turned again and headed for another mountain range, going back and forth like this. He seemed to be getting further and further away from the main palace of the Misty Mansion. Zhang Xiaoxiao naturally felt more at ease the more he chased. If you had thought of a way to escape back, I might have some misgivings. In order to avoid encountering a strong enemy that I can't destroy, or even revealing my identity, I might have even let you go. But you ran further and further away in your panic. Then you can only blame your own bad luck. Right now, the two of them were already about 2,000 li away from the main palace of the Misty Mansion. There were clearly no other powerful experts in the vicinity. I, Zhang Xiaoxiao, am the king here. I am the only one. Do you think that you can wear me down with your speed? That's just wishful thinking and the ravings of a lunatic. In the blink of an eye, a few more mountains were getting further and further away from them. The two of them charged up the tallest mountain peak in front of them at the same time, then flew down at the same time. Below was a canyon, and it was desolate and desolate. There weren't even a few trees. It could be said to be a dangerous place and also a natural battlefield. Zhang Xiaoxiao flew down, his speed as fast as lightning. But he immediately stopped in his tracks, standing on the spot, not moving at all. Because in front of him, that black-robed and masked man, who was dressed almost the same as him, was standing quietly with his hands behind his back, as if he was waiting for him. The most surprising thing was that there was nothing on this black-robed man's body. That humanoid object that he had been holding had long disappeared. He was just standing there, as if he hadn't gone through any 2,000 li of sprinting. His posture was relaxed, his figure tall and straight, and his breathing was indistinct, without the slightest sign of urgency. Could it be that he was waiting for me? This thought popped up in Zhang Xiaoxiao's mind. Could it be that not only do I want to kill him, he also has the intention to kill me? But the battle between the two of us is somewhat shameful, so he led me all the way here. Thinking of this, Zhang Xiaoxiao almost laughed out loud. Even in the entire Misty Mansion, how many people had the confidence to say that they could defeat him, or even kill him? Perhaps there were a few, but it definitely did not include this mysterious person in front of him. A person whose strength was clearly inferior to him actually wanted to kill him? That was simply a fantasy. You were waiting for me? Intending to kill me? Zhang Xiaoxiao's tone was cold. This was completely different from his usual tone. No matter what the situation was, he would never reveal his identity as the earth-piercing hand. Even when facing this masked stranger that he had never seen before, he would not use his original voice to speak. There were always accidents in everything. If this person was lucky and did not die, Zhang Xiaoxiao did not realize that when he saw the other party waiting here calmly, his mentality had already undergone a subtle change. He was no longer confident. He had already thought that the other party was already in his bag, and he only needed to make a move, and he would be able to kill him easily. However, when he saw that the other party was not in a hurry and had actually stopped to wait calmly, he did not feel the joy of the enemy is at the end of the line and has nowhere to go that he often felt in the past. In fact, he even felt a little uneasy, as if he had already fallen into the enemy's trap. Chapter 1001. Also, although Zhang Xiaoxiao's first sentence seemed calm and aggressive, it exposed the bottom line of his heart. But it exposed the collapse of his psychological bottom line. You were waiting for me? Intending to kill me? The main point of this sentence was that the enemy wanted to kill him. If he had come full of ambition, it should be, finally not running anymore? You've chosen to wait for death here? Although it was the same word, but the meaning behind it was several streets apart, Jun Moxie could definitely be considered as one of the top psychologists in this world. Right now, although Zhang Xiaoxiao was masked, but from his actions and tone, how could he not tell that this fellow had some apprehension in his heart? Before we make our move, I want to complain a little. Your speed is really too slow. No matter how I look at you, I can't tell that you're actually a Saint Venerable. Jun Moxie placed his hands behind his back and sighed lightly. Using a somewhat desolate voice, it was hard to tell how old he was. He said slowly, previously, in order to wait for you, I had no choice but to slow down time and time again, and I had no choice but to shake you off every time I turned a corner. It was really tiring for me to bring you all the way here. Finally, I found a place that's pleasing to the eye and ended this extremely boring game of tag. Since the enemy already has some apprehension in his heart, then I'll add a little more medicine to the mix. Zhang Xiaoxiao's heart shook. Could it be that this entire way, it wasn't that he had been chasing the enemy until he was exhausted and running for his life, but that the enemy had already planned this, leading him by the nose all the way here, and even picking up this place casually? What a joke. When you say this, you seem to have forgotten the pathetic state of being chased to the ends of the earth by me. With your measly strength, do you really have the right to say these words? Zhang Xiaoxiao laughed loudly. This entire time, did you really think that the strength I've displayed so far? Did you really think that the strength I displayed earlier was only this? Jun Moxie smiled lightly. Let me ask you a question. If this old man really had the intention to run with this old man's methods, would you be able to stop the reinforcements from behind? If I join hands with those reinforcements, what are your chances of escaping unscathed? That might not be the case. Zhang Xiaoxiao was speechless. However, he was a person of considerable status, so he didn't want to speak against his conscience. Thus, he could only say it's not necessarily. In fact, when he heard the other party say this, Zhang Xiaoxiao's back was already drenched in cold sweat. Just from the analysis of the other party's qinggong, even if this person's strength was slightly weaker than his, it was definitely not that much weaker. Especially in the aspect of qinggong and movement techniques, it was extremely marvelous. If he hadn't chosen to run for his life at that time, and had turned to join the reinforcements, he naturally wouldn't have been able to stop them. Furthermore, if Chao Guofeng, Miao Jingyun, and the rest had caught up and joined hands to kill him, it wouldn't have been too difficult. And this guy really did have the ability to entangle him and not let him escape easily. If that was the case, even if he wanted to escape, he would have to pay a considerable price. More importantly, it was extremely likely that his true identity would be exposed. But why didn't he do that? Could it be that he's so certain of defeating me? That he's so confident? Zhang Xiaoxiao raised his head and said, "Then why didn't you do that?" As for why this old man didn't do that, there are two reasons. Jun Moxie turned around with his hands behind his back. The speed at which he turned was very slow, but it was extremely graceful and calm. Even Zhang Xiaoxiao, who was standing on the opposing side, felt that this movement of his was very elegant and beautiful. From the looks of it, the other party really didn't have any psychological pressure. Just as this thought appeared in Zhang Xiaoxiao's mind, Jun Moxie suddenly increased his speed, turning his half-turn body around with a schwa sound. At the same time, he raised his head and looked up. Two exceptionally sharp and cold eyes, carrying with them a disdainful arrogance, locked onto Zhang Xiaoxiao's eyes in a flash. This series of movements of Jun Moxie's turning, raising his head, raising his eyebrows, and piercing eyes could be said to be done in one go. And it could be said to have reached the pinnacle of perfection. He first aroused Zhang Xiaoxiao's suspicions with a posture, then aroused his suspicions with a few words. But when Zhang Xiaoxiao was speaking in a questioning tone, he suddenly turned around, locking onto his gaze. This was a classic example of gaining the upper hand by a show of strength. When two armies were facing off, if one side had doubts in their hearts, their morale would definitely be weakened. At the very least, they wouldn't be at their peak. And at this point in time, they would definitely have other thoughts in their hearts. This was a rare moment of emptiness in his mind. If both sides were mediocre, then it naturally wouldn't matter. But if both sides were peerless experts, then this opportunity would be extremely rare, enough to separate life and death. In a battle between experts, especially between experts of the same level, a battle of strength would always be a low-level move. Even a battle of wits could only be considered as a mid-level move. Only a battle of strength was the most important. Right now, it was a battle of strength. Momentum. With just a few words, Jun Moxie had already gained the absolute upper hand by raising his head and raising his eyebrows. It looked easy, but it contained an extremely precise grasp of his mentality and timing. All of the above were indispensable. Zhang Xiaoxiao instantly felt as if there were two dazzling bolts of lightning flashing violently in front of his eyes as the other party's gaze pierced through the space of confrontation and shone into his own eyes. The other party's gaze was like the fiercest and fiercest bolt of lightning. With the force of a sudden clap of thunder, it pressed over with the force of a thunderbolt. In this instant, he actually had a strong urge to close his eyes to avoid the sharpness of the other party's gaze. Although Zhang Xiaoxiao did not close his eyes in the end, he still couldn't help but narrow his eyes and take half a step back. Then, feeling that this was showing weakness, he retracted that half step back. This was a subconscious action. But this subconscious action of narrowing his eyes, taking a step back, and advancing again caused the momentum that Zhang Xiaoxiao had gathered with great difficulty to dissipate once again. The battle of momentum was completely defeated. Zhang Xiaoxiao clearly realized that in this confrontation with the other party, He had already fallen into a complete disadvantage, and there was no possibility of a comeback. If this situation could not be improved, and he fought with an opponent of the same level in this state, he would only be able to bring out about 80% of his strength. When experts exchanged blows, life and death could be decided in an instant. The slightest difference could lead to a difference of 1,000 miles. Forcefully fighting with a strong opponent in this state was basically sending his life into the hands of the other party. Zhang Xiaoxiao was already feeling a little anxious. 2 reasons? False bravado. Ha! It's clearly you who are cowardly. Afraid of death. Zhang Xiaoxiao laughed mockingly. Why the need to act mysterious to give face? To you, escaping from my hands should be a very honorable thing. Jun Moxie did not speak, nor did he retort. He only looked at Zhang Xiaoxiao calmly and quietly. Zhang Xiaoxiao realized that there was an additional trace of pity and mockery in the other party's eyes. Don't look at me like that. The undisguised mockery in the other party's eyes caused an indescribable rage to rise in Zhang Xiaoxiao's heart. And after that angry roar, Zhang Xiaoxiao only felt his emotions becoming more and more unstable. He hurriedly tried to control it. Facing a strong enemy, to act recklessly and recklessly. This was an unforgivable way to seek death. Do you even believe what you said just now? If the answer is no, you will only be disdainful. Why would you be angry? Jun Moxie's eyes turned cold behind the mask, carrying with it a cold aura of someone who held the power of life and death in his hands. He said disdainfully, in fact, ever since I appeared, I've always held the initiative. And you have never had the ability to change anything. What you see is forever only my back. And you are only fit to see my back. You're not qualified. If I don't want you to see my front, then you'll never be able to see it. Jun Mosie's words were equivalent to a sentence of absolute nonsense. He was running in front, and the other party was chasing him from behind. From start to end, he couldn't catch up, so how could he not look at his back? If he could see his front, then it meant that he had successfully intercepted him and not pursued him. As for the initiative, if a person who was running did not have the initiative, he would have been caught long ago. If these words were said earlier, Zhang Xiaoxiao would definitely scoff in disdain and disdain. But when these words were said in Zhang Xiaoxiao's current state of mind, the effect was completely different. That's right, if the chase earlier was a contest, the other party had indeed held the overall initiative. Even choosing to face him here was also the other party's initiative, otherwise, he would probably have to continue chasing. He was a Saint Venerable expert, yet he had been led by the nose by the other party for nearly 3,000 li. Thinking of this, Zhang Xiaoxiao's entire body was covered in cold sweat. His battle intent had already weakened to the extreme. Don't talk nonsense anymore. Zhang Xiaoxiao forcefully controlled his state of mind. His eyes gradually turned sharp. Victory is never decided by words, but by fighting with one's hands. Let the two of us have a fair fight. To be honest, Zhang Xiaoxiao no longer dared to listen to the other party anymore. The more the other party spoke, the more he felt his confidence slipping. What? A Saint Venerable expert doesn't have the confidence to finish listening to what I have to say? Jun Moxie laughed lightly, a hint of mockery in his eyes. Are you afraid? Afraid that I'll use words to completely crush your confidence? Afraid that you'll lose without a fight? Afraid that you'll run away before I finish speaking? From the way I see it, you're no longer qualified to fight with me. Bullshit. Zhang Xiaoxiao cursed in a low voice. What's the point of saying so much? Make your move. You're wrong. This battle between you and me has long begun. In fact, from the start of the chase, this contest has already begun. You're tuning in to the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.